Welcome to the regular meeting of the Delray Oaks City Council. Today is Tuesday, January 26th, and it is 6 o'clock on the nose. Karen, can you please do a roll call?
Councilmember Gagliotti.
Here.
Councilmember Shirley.
Here.
Councilmember Donaldson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lintel.
Here.
Mayor Kerr.
Here. Randy, can you please put the flag up? And Jim Clark, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? You have to go off. There you go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag.
of the United
States of America,
and to the republic
for
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, it's time for public comments. General public comment must deal with matters subject to the jurisdiction of the city and the council that are not on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the city council on matters not appearing on the agenda may do so now. Public may comment on any other matter listed on the agenda at the time the matter is being considered. There will be a time limit of no more than 3 minutes for each speaker. No action will be taken on the matters brought up, and all comments will be referred to staff. So now is the chance. Any public comment on anything not on the agenda?
If I have a public comment.
Okay, Scott Waltz.
A number of months ago, Sustainable Delray Oaks got together some folks on Beach Cleanup Day and took trash in our community out of the Arroyo del Rey. That was a great community effort. Folks showed up, was great. But there were a number of items, big items, that were sunk into the waterway. And I just want to express public appreciation for city staff, and especially Ron, for coming to our rescue. He took the time, was very responsive. He got the equipment he needed and the staff out there to pull out a very large aluminum pipe behind the garden center that I'm sure had been there quite a while. Also, we contacted him about getting a grocery cart that was sunk in the waterway out. And he got it out. And then he contacted me and he said, hey, I got it. And he showed me a picture. And I said, that's not the one we found. So Ron actually found 2 grocery carts. So I just want to thank city staff for their responsiveness and their efforts, and especially Ron for getting the city's work done, even if it means just sort of cleaning up our waterway. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Any other public comments? I'm Jim Clark.
Got it that time. Hi, I'm glad you brought that up because I'd almost forgot that we were out for a walk the other night and we took the cut down between Rosita and Paloma, and it has been retarred. That may not be the right word. It's blacktopped again. Mm-hmm. And it was so much safer to walk down that thing. And fortunately, I saw Ron on the street of Villa Verde recently, was able to tell him. But again, when positive things happen, we definitely need to take our pom-poms and shake them, because good things are going on. The other thing that I wanted to comment about briefly is that I realized at the swearing-in ceremony at the last city council meeting, I never stopped to think about the oath that you guys are taking to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And it was one of those things you wake up in the morning and go, well, I, as an adult, when is the last time I ever read the Constitution? And so I thought I would just put it to you, the city council members and the mayors, that if you haven't read it recently as an adult, it's something you took a solemn oath to defend and protect. It might be something to just read through. I did since that last meeting, and I got stimulated by that. And there's some very interesting stuff in there that would really keep all this, a lot of these arguments that are going on from happening if people just read it as opposed to thinking they know what it says. So that's just kind of my challenge. If you haven't in your adult life recently and you've sworn to uphold it, it might be worth the 30 minutes it takes to go through it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. Any other public comments? Please raise your hand. All right, I am not seeing any. Let me do one more quick. All right, I am not seeing any, so we're going to close public comment and move on. We have a special proclamation this evening, and we have former Chief of Police Herschel Amos's family, some of his family with us this evening. Let me read the proclamation. It'll tell us all a little bit about Mr. Amos, and then if anyone has some comments, we would entertain that as well. All right, proclamation honoring Herschel R. Amos. Whereas the city of Delray Oaks, the Amos family, friends, and community lost a special person with the death of Herschel R. Amos on December 17th, 2020. And whereas Herschel Amos was born in Evansville, Indiana, and with his parents and siblings moved to the Monterey Peninsula, where Herschel graduated from Monterey High School and then joined the United States Marine Corps. And whereas in 1960, Mr. Amos joined the Seaside Police Department, where he served until 1976, attaining the rank of captain. During this time, Herschel continued with his education, receiving his associate's degree, bachelor's degree, and a master's in public administration. And whereas Mr. Amos became the chief of police of Delray Oaks in 1976, retiring in 1976, right, and retiring 1986. And whereas Chief Amos graduated from the FBI National Academy session number 109 in 1977. And whereas Chief Amos led the police department through one of the most difficult periods of time in the city's financial history with the passage of California Proposition 13, which decimated the city's property tax base, effectively crippling the Delray Oaks PD. And whereas Chief Amos was a leading advocate of the city of Delray Oaks public safety tax that passed repeatedly to fund public safety services in the city, which in turn kept our police department staffed 24/7 to serve the citizens of Delray Oaks. And whereas Chief Amos worked every Christmas holiday so that his officers could spend the time with their families, and whereas Chief Amos exemplified community policing while stressing to his officers the need to interact with the community that they serve. And whereas Chief Amos was always proud that officers he hired went on to become commanders and chiefs of police in Delray Oaks and other police departments. And whereas Chief Amos was a proud member of the Freemasons and earned the highest honorary degree, the 33rd degree. And whereas Chief Amos gave back to the community as a member of many civic organizations, including the Moose Lodge, the American Legion, and the Monterey County Peace Officers Association. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Allison Kerr, urge all citizens to celebrate the life of Herschel R. Amos, extending our sympathy to his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. He will be missed. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Delray Oaks to be affixed this 26th day of January 2021. I was thinking, I don't remember your grandfather and father, and which is a good thing as a resident, right? But I wonder if there's anyone here that does remember him. I'm thinking Karen might. Manami? No?
Mayor, if I could, I would like to make a comment.
Okay, please do.
Yeah, it was about 20 years ago. I was stationed in Germany with the Army, and I received reassignment orders to Monterey. And I really didn't know anyone here. And when I arrived, I moved into a small house in Seaside on Highland Street. And the first person I met was my next door neighbor, Herschel Amos. And over the years, I got to know him better. And I will tell you, he was a wonderful man, a proud American, and every bit the person that the mayor described in that proclamation. And my deepest condolences go out to his family.
Thank you.
Would anyone in the family like to say something to the residents that are here this evening?
I would just like to say thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for recognizing my father and our grandfather. He was a very strong man with a huge heart, and we miss him very much.
Thank you. Well, our heart goes out to you and your family on your loss. And we will get a copy of the proclamation to your family in the next couple of days.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your grandfather's service or your father's service.
Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. It means a lot.
Good.
Thank
Chris, did you want to say something? Chris Borquin?
I will. I was waving actually, but I did not work for Chief Amos, but I worked for the people that worked for Chief Amos. So that's how it works in law enforcement. I did meet him on several occasions, always very nice, and his wife as well. So I just wanted to thank Nancy. She made it really easy for us to put this together. And just thank you very much, Nancy.
Thank you all very much.
All right. Thank you for coming and John, did you?
Yeah. I remember Chief Amos, the only time I've ever been arrested in my life.
John, can you just let them know who you are?
Yeah, my name is John Gagliardi. I live at 864 Portola.
Thanks.
But the only time I ever really had any run-ins with the law was with the Delray Oaks police officers, because I ran with kind of a ridiculously idiot crowd back then. It wasn't Chief Amos who actually arrested me. It was the youth officer. But they made the decision. My mom was actually watching Gandhi, and it was a 3-hour play or a three-hour movie, and so they knew that she wasn't going to be home before late. So they just took me home and left me in the house. They knew where I lived. They knew my mom, and then they came back when she returned home and said, "Hey, we arrested John," and then I got in trouble for that after that. But just in terms of just the communities, in the community, it was. That was just the way that the police force was at the time, is that if you got in trouble, they would just handle it basically within the community. So.
That explains it. All right. Anybody else before we move on? Seeing none. Thank you again for being here, and we'll make sure you get the proclamation.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. All right, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone on the council want to pull any item? I don't see everybody all on one screen. Hang on just a moment. Okay, seeing none. Anybody in the public like to pull anything? Ken Rutherford.
Yes, thanks so much. Ken Rutherford. I would like to pull the agenda from the special meeting on January 7th, if I could.
Okay.
And just would object to the appointment of Ms. Getzel on the Monterey Mosquito Abatement Board. I've sent all the council a letter expressing my concerns about that. Again, it's just a formality, wanting to make sure that the city goes forward and tries to follow the law closely and cleans up some of the missteps in the past. I would just ask that someone from council be appointed if it is still, in fact, a board that only an elected official should be serving on. Otherwise, I would ask the city to comply with the state laws with respect to the notice requirements for that board. Also, the budget committee, I would object to the 3 council members being appointed to the budget committee. I believe that that would be frankly a violation of our ordinance that requires that any committee of the council be that of the whole. And I think it actually serves to fracture the
Your
city
Honor.
council.
Your Honor, if I might, the speaker speaks to 5A3, which is adoption of the minutes. That's the action before council. Rehashing the actions of the council previously is not part of the consent agenda. So with that, perhaps the speaker had an objection to the minutes that are to be adopted pursuant to the consent agenda, but again, not the moment to bring the item back before council.
Well, I
Thank you.
apologize for that formality. So yes, I guess I'm just making then a record. If it's not time to object to those, are they going to be presented again, I guess, at the next council meeting to be objected to then at that point?
These are just the minutes being adopted by the council. There is no action on this. If there's a correction to be made to the minutes or something along those lines, now is that opportunity, but the item's not before council for discussion tonight.
All right, well, I've submitted my letters, then I will just withdraw my pulling of those items. I think all the council have been made aware of my objections to those, and I hope we can do better going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Alice?
Yes, this is Douglas McKenzie at 16 South Cito. And I'd like to pull the minutes for the December 9th, 2020 regular planning commission meeting.
So that's item A2.
Correct.
Would you like to address that now?
Certainly.
Okay.
In my opinion, the city council has no jurisdiction or place to be approving the planning commission's minutes. None whatsoever. The planning commission ought to approve their own minutes. I don't know when it got to be the practice that you lumped all these things into one, but it's not right. Which one of you council members was at the planning commission meeting?
I was.
Your Honor, again, I don't know that this is the opportunity to engage in a dialogue with respect to this. I would say that if the
Excuse me,
council,
you're interrupting me.
Madam Mayor, it's at your discretion.
Please,
If-
Alex,
if you'd like
please
me to
address,
continue.
please.
You interrupted Ken, now you're interrupting me. I don't appreciate it. Yeah, you can smile all you want, dude.
Perhaps Mr. McKenzie would like to just go ahead and finish his comments.
Yes, thank you, sir. Well, I reiterate that whether procedurally correct or not, this is not right. Thank you very much.
So, Your Honor, at the pleasure of the council could go ahead and adopt the consent agenda, barring any further objections, minus 5A2, and those meeting minutes could be adopted by the Planning Commission, which I understand to be the standard practice of the city. So maybe this is just a typo to include, but certainly a motion could be made to adopt the consent agenda, all items excluding 5A2.
Thank you. Anybody else want to pull any item?
Excuse me.
Karen? Yes.
Those were approved by the planning commission.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
So it's informational in nature then. Okay.
yes.
So I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we adopt the consent agenda with the exclusion of 5A2.
I second. Karen, could you do a roll call vote, please?
I just have a quick question though, since
Who? Okay,
it's
Scott?
Scott.
okay.
So since those minutes were already approved by the planning commission, do we have to exclude that item?
You don't. I mean, you can just vote to receive them. They're already approved.
Right.
So if the motion maker wants to just approve the entire consent agenda, I think that would be fine. You're just receiving them as information to the council.
John?
I move to receive approve the consent agenda as staff.
And,
yeah.
Okay, and I agree
In its
as the
entirety.
seconder. I
Okay.
agree. Karen, could you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Gagliotti,
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley,
Yes.
Councilmember Donaldson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lintel,
Aye.
Mayor Kerr.
Aye. All right, so we're going to move on to new business. Item 6A is to receive an overview of the Brown Act and ethics from City Attorney Lorca. I asked him to do this particularly for our new council members, as well as to address the verbiage in the code of conduct, which suggests an annual review. We have been discussing this, and we will be doing another one during the summer for the new planning commissioners. So on that note, I'd like to turn it over to our legal counsel, Lorca.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think Randy's got my slides here. Yeah, so the mayor reached out and said, you know, it ought to be, we ought to get some together for the new council members and for the existing council members and the public to sort of have a high level review of the trainings that are required and what reviews we sort of do on an annual basis. So I put the main ones up here, which are the AB 1234, which many of you are familiar with. That's Ethics, Brown Act, Public Records Act. AB 1661, which is Sexual Harassment Prevention, the city's Conflict of Interest Statement, and the Delray Oaks Code of Conduct. Next slide, Randy, please. So with respect to AB 1234, it's provided in the government code that at least 2 hours every 2 years, public officials need to receive training. And broken down a little bit, it's two main areas. There's the ethics, which covers impermissible contracts, what's known as 1090 violations, the Political Reform Act, conflicts of interest, bias, and use of public funds. And the second half of that is the open government or the sunshine laws, the Brown Act and the Public Records Act. We are working on doing a presentation for the council, probably in a special setting, not an evening council meeting, because it's 2 very full hours. My understanding is the public is welcome to come to that. And so we'll be looking at sometime in February to put that on for the council. Next slide, Randy, please. So 1661 is a little bit newer, but requires local agency officials to receive sexual harassment prevention and education training. The local jurisdiction can designate employees and, you know, beyond the scope of the statute that should receive it. And that's every 2 years, 2 hours. And for those of you that are newly elected within the first 6 months of taking office. And that's something that our office, if it's the pleasure of the council, can put on as well. Next slide, please. Conflicts of interest filing. For those of you that have done it for a while, you know the Form 700. Those are to be done annually. Those of you that are new to the council, you'll be filling out, if you haven't already, an assuming office statement. Generally, these are coordinated through the city clerk, who submits them then to the state. But essentially, these forms are sort of an annual disclosure regarding, you know, sources of income, interest in real property, investments, and depending on the level, if you will, of local officials and city employees, it's the sort of the level of detail that you have to do, and that's guided by the city's conflict of interest code, which we look at every year. And I think, I'm not sure when the last time we did it is, maybe Karen knows, but that's not usually on a yearly timestamp. Usually it's, you know, unless we've had an organizational change, which requires a reassignment, that usually tends to stay pretty static throughout the years. Next slide, Randy. City of Delray Oaks Code of Conduct. It was something that the city council felt in 2005 that needed to be passed, all about sort of being, you know, transparent, polite, all those kind of good things. There's a statement in there saying that the code of conduct shall be reviewed and updated as necessary. So at the pleasure of the council, I am happy to go and review that with council or talk about updating that with council. It does provide that members entering office will be asked to sign a statement affirming that they've read that. I don't know if that's the city's practice to date, but it's certainly something that we can look into establishing as part of the welcome aboard package to newly elected council members, planning commissioners, things like that. And one more slide, Randy. So the path forward on these is, as I mentioned, in February, I'll do a standalone meeting to present AB 1234. And if you come for those 2 hours, you're good for 2 years. At the direction of council, we can also do a sexual harassment training, something that our firm does regularly in a variety of contexts. The conflict of interest statements, those are yearly submissions to the state. If you have any questions on those, you can ask me, what disclosures and, questions on disclosure. That's a common thing I get questions on. And the code of conduct can be reviewed and updated at the pleasure of the council. So those are the four main things in terms of sort of ethics, disclosure, that type of stuff that we do on a regular time stamp.
All
And
right.
Mayor, I don't think there's any action on this. It's just informational, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Right. So there is no action needed today, but if anyone has any comments or questions, I'll start with the council.
None.
I just have a quick comment. Both Council Member Shirley and I are attending the new Council Members Academy, and they offer that AB 1234 training during that time. So I'm sure both of us will be taken care of through that.
Good.
Yes. Any other council comments? All right. Any public comments, questions? All right. I'm not seeing any. So I'll come back to the council, and there's no action. We'll move on to the next item, which is 6B, consider applications for the administrative hearing officers. So before I turn this over to Chief Hoyne, there was an additional interest from Frederica Jones, who the council received information about, but the public did not. It was corrected after the agenda went out. So I'd like to turn this over to Jeff Hoyne to talk a little bit about, there are some nuances in one of the positions.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. This position is the Administrative Hearing Officer. These Administrative Hearing Officers hear administrative hearings, appeals for different administrative citations and the like for the city so that they can be adjudicated fairly and openly in a public setting. Normally, our municipal code says that we will have 3 of them, with 2 of them being appointed in even number of years and 1 being appointed in odd number of years. For some reason, and I believe it was because of people leaving the posts prior to the expiration of their term and new folks coming on, that actually was reversed and mixed up. So to basically get back in compliance with our code, as pointed out earlier in some of the public comments, we're trying to clean these things up. One of the positions will only be an assignment for 1 year because it is an odd number year. And next year we will be able to be on the proper schedule for those administrative hearing officer assignments. And I'm glad to answer any questions about that.
Sorry, I'm going to start with the council. Ms. Lintel, any questions?
And none, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gagliotti?
None.
Okay. Mr. Donaldson?
No questions. I'm just very impressed with the quality of the candidates across the board, not just for this administrative hearing officer position, but the rest of them. So thank you very much to all of the candidates for stepping up.
Okay. Ms. Shirley?
Yes, Chief Hoyne, so we have already 1 administrative officer because we're going to have 3 total, right? So we're picking 2 tonight, just to clarify.
We are selecting 2. There may be an issue with the term of the other one, but
Okay.
we'll address that at a later time. And it's an issue that came up about when folks were assigned. So we have to do some research. The code in the municipal code allows 3, and we're working to fill those, but we're working on the 2 tonight. But only 1 can be appointed technically in an odd year. So we're trying to reset the timing of it. And then I will be bringing more information about the full status of the 3 at council probably next month, and I'll be discussing it with council prior to that individually.
Okay, I'm sorry. I still need to clarify. So we currently don't have any administrative officers, correct?
No, we have one. Those
We have one.
Yes.
Okay.
It's Andy Clark
Oh, okay.
is
Okay.
serving in that
Correct.
position.
Correct. So
And then-
we do have one. However, there's some issues with Mr. Clark's term that we have to clarify that we found out today. And if we have to take further action, we will do that probably next month.
Okay. And then so we're choosing 2 or 1 tonight.
We are choosing
we're-
2, one for a
2.
1-year term, and I believe we have a volunteer for that 1-year term specifically. And then there will be one for a 2-year term.
Perfect. Thank you.
What I'd like to do is ask each of the applicants if they would like to say something. I would like to start with Mr. Peterlin. Is he here? Karen, can you help me? I'm not seeing or
Sam.
okay, or hearing him. So I'll go to Frederica Jones. Would you like to say anything?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me this evening. I would be honored to be considered for the administrating hearing officer position. I have law enforcement background, working in the Superior Courts of 3 different counties. I would be eager to serve in this capacity representing Delray Oaks, and I thank you for considering my application.
Thank you. I'd like to go out. I'm hearing an echo. Is anybody else? No, it's gone. I'd like to go out to the public. Any questions, comments? I am not seeing any hands raised in the chat. I see one, Jeff Hoyne.
Mayor and Council, since Mr. Peterlin was not here, I would like to clarify that we have email correspondence with him where he is willing to be appointed to the 1-year term for this.
Wonderful. Any other public comment? All right, I'd like to come back to the council. I would like to move, unless there's other questions or concerns, I would like to move that we approve Paul Peterlin for the 1-year position and Frederica Jones for the 2-year position of administrative hearing officers.
I'll second that.
Second. Okay.
Okay. Karen, could you please do a roll call?
Councilmember Gagliotti,
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley,
Aye.
Councilmember Donaldson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lintel,
Aye.
Mayor Kerr.
Aye. So the appointments pass unanimously. Welcome and thank you for your service. All right, we're going to move on to consider applications for the Police Advisory Committee members. This is a brand new advisory role for 5 residents. Each council person gets to appoint 1 member of the public, and our acting city manager gets to select 2 people. So before we do the vote, I'd like to see if anyone has, any of the council have any questions. I'll start with Ms. Lintel.
None. I presume we will be interviewing them this evening, or they were making a statement.
We can ask for that.
Alrighty, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gagliotti,
None.
Mr. Donaldson,
No questions.
Ms. Shirley.
Nope.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, similarly to what we did for the administrative hearing officers, I'd like to go out to, I do believe there's 8 applicants. And if there is an applicant here that would like to make a statement, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. I am not seeing any hands raised. Ms. Lintel, did you have a question?
No, I just thought it would be interesting because I have read their applications, so that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, I do see Louise Getzel's hand raised.
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good evening. And I have extensive experience in the law enforcement field. And I was also very active in developing policies and procedures and implementing plans of those over my career. And although I'm no longer a member of the city council, I do believe I have an obligation to continue to serve the city, and I look forward to doing so in this position. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm guessing not everyone is here, Ms. Lintel. So what I'm going to do is bring it back to the council. How it was originally presented was each of us get to appoint a person. So what I would like to do is go through each council member and hear your nomination, and then we will vote on the full slate. So let's start with you, Ms. Lintel.
Yes, actually, Louise Getzel is my recommendation because she does have the experience and she's knowledgeable on city government as she has served as a council member. So I highly recommend that she be one of the candidates that is approved. Thank you.
Great, great. Mr. Gagliotti.
I was probably Jim Clark
Okay,
would be my recommendation.
okay. Scott Donaldson.
Yes, my nomination would be Mark Thomas. I think he is not only very well qualified for the position, but I've spoken to him on several occasions. I think he's going to do an outstanding job.
Great. Kim Shirley.
I'd like to recommend Frederica Jones.
Okay. And I would like to recommend Paul Keen. And I'd also like to go to acting city manager for his two appointments.
The two nominations I would like to put forward, and just for the edification of citizens and those who are joining the meeting, these are stakeholder positions that the city manager, according to the resolution, nominates. And a stakeholder is a business owner, a member of the faith-based community, or someone else who may or may not be a resident, but has some form of business or stakeholding in the city. The first one is Ronald Rowland, who is a business owner in the city. And the second is Matthew Wright, who is a stakeholder with our airport contract, with our law enforcement contract at the airport district. He's the vice president general manager of the Jet Center. But it's a kind of a double whammy because he also is a citizen of our fine city.
Great. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and move that we appoint Louise Getzel, Jim Clark, Mark Thomas, Frederica Jones, Paul Keen, Jay Rowland, and Matt Wright to our very first police advisory committee.
Just one question for, that's everyone, right? I mean, how many?
No, there was one remaining.
Okay.
We had one additional applicant.
Okay. I will second that motion. Yeah, that's good.
I have a question on that. Does
Okay.
that mean that we have no business person represented there?
Those decisions are acting city managers. So Mr. Rowland, Jay Rowland, is a business owner in the city.
Okay. And he is one of the ones you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
he owns the large white building by the Oaks.
Okay. And I'll second it.
Okay, John already has, but thank
And
you.
Mayor,
Oh,
Yeah.
just a clarification point. His name is Ronald J. Rowland.
Sorry, I know him as
Okay.
Jay. I know him as Jay.
I just,
So
to clarify
Mr.
for people who may have
Mr.
seen
Rowland.
that in the packet, yes.
All right. So Karen, could you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Gagliotti,
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley,
Aye.
Councilmember Donaldson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lintel,
Aye.
Mayor Kerr.
Aye. So Louise Getzel, Jim Clark, Mark Thomas, Frederica Jones, Paul Keen, Ray Rowland, R. Rowland, and Matt Wright are our brand new Police Advisory Committee members. Thank you, Acting City Manager, for making that happen for our city. So we're going to move on to item 6D, consider applications to fill one vacancy on the Planning Commission. Any comments, Acting City Manager Hoyne, before we go to the council?
And Karen can confirm this, I believe we've had 3 applications for the Planning Commission for one position.
Yes.
And I just want to thank all 3 who have come forward. As we've seen, the Planning Commission is a lot of work, and we need some good, strong people in that position to get the city's work done. Thank you.
Great. So unless the council has any questions, what I'd like to do is ask each one to give a little spiel, and then if we have questions of them, to ask. Is that okay with everyone on the council?
Yes.
It's good.
Okay, so I don't have my names in front of me, but I see his face, but I only see SAB.
Oh, that's Mike Berger.
Would you like to start, Mr. Berger?
Back on the Zoom meeting of the city. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Okay, good. We've lived here in Delray Oaks for 2 years, and in that 2 years, we've really gotten to learn and enjoy what it is to be a Delray Oaks resident and what is the makeup of Delray Oaks. We've been in Monterey for 4 years, originally from Southern California, and we spent the first 2 years in Monterey trying to find the right place to live. Delray Oaks is a special place, and I have a desire to be part of Delray Oaks and keeping it special, and keeping the makeup of Delray Oaks, and helping identify the things that make it special, and to maintain those things, not to prevent progress, but to enhance the progress. I know there's a big project coming up with Fort Ord, and I'd like to be involved with that to see if any of my experience could help. And also, I've been through the process of doing an expansion here in our home, and I was highly impressed with the process, and I was highly impressed with how we were treated, and it gave me the desire to be part of that, because I've been involved in a big project in Southern California. Not a big project, it was a home, but dealing with the Coastal Commission and dealing with the local planning commission, and just almost to the point of being treated poorly, because these people felt like they were bothered by us taking their time. I didn't get that from this planning commission, and again, my experience makes me want to be a part of something good like that. And I also, if there's going to be an expansion of Fort Ord, I'd like to see what we can do to help make that project, as well as Delray Oaks, more green, and also to help satisfy what our master plan is and what we've applied to the state of California as what our goals are with housing, with low-income housing, and things of that sort.
Great, thank you. Any council questions?
No.
Ms. Shirley?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Berger. Thank you so much for applying. And I just have a quick question. I was wondering if you could provide some examples or descriptions of what you view as sustainable building.
Sustainable, well, it's really a big word for starters. I have feelings about how to help with special funding with and requirements of buildings to have water collection systems and also solar power. and solar power collection systems. Those are examples of what I would think is sustainable. You know, and there's a lot I would need to learn as well, but I'm have become such an open-minded person to something that is so essential. Something that is kind of new to me, but now everywhere I look, I'm looking at where can you make this better for the environment, better for the community, and better for, you know, I guess our kids' future, if you want to look at it that way.
Great, thank you. I have one more question. Is that okay, Mayor?
Yeah.
So we are going to have an ADU ordinance coming up here soon. I was wondering if you can tell me sort of your thoughts on ADU ordinances and what you feel we might want to include in ours.
So ADU, are you talking about American Disability, or can you break down the?
They're like the granny units, the auxiliary,
accessory
dwelling. Yeah, accessory dwelling
I'm
unit.
sorry, just like what Seaside is doing. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I like with everything, there has to be a criteria to follow. There has to be a criteria on the size of the property, how it imposes on the neighbors. You know, what is the use for it? Is it a rental? That's a pretty big question, because I think the first thing needs to be identified what the intended use needs to be for these units. Is it supposed to be for a relative? Is it supposed to be for income? And then I think that helps dictate what the size and encroachments and things that might be allowed for something like that. And also the impact on our water and impact on the properties. Already, how is the property already being used? Is it meeting a conformity of electricity and water use, or is it way overboard? I think those are things we probably need to look at. So if that answers your question, that's kind of my feeling of it. I'm not against it.
Thank you.
Dot, John, Pat?
Mm-mm.
No, okay. I have one. What's your take on the local water situation as far as development goes? How much are you familiar with Delray Oaks' situation at Fort Ord and in the city?
If I could be candid on this, I'm not learned enough to give you a good answer. I'm a little confused by it. The information that I've read is kind of spins your head a little bit, and it's a lot to absorb. I don't have a good answer because I don't think I've seen enough good information to make a decision on that. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better one than that, but really what's out there is kind of wild.
Yeah, no, it is complicated. And then the last thing, what do you think is the biggest concern for our city?
In regards to housing, or in general?
Well, Planning Commission touches a lot of things in addition to just simply housing or development.
That's a pretty big question. I mean, I've always been an advocate of safety. In Delray Oaks, education is a concern, but that's also something that's blanketed with the city of Monterey. Safety is important. Resources are important. It's a pretty big question to give you one simple answer. But I am a big advocate of safety. And when it comes to safety, that also does include relationships with the neighbors. And I guess that would apply to Planning Commission and how you're considerate to your neighbors with the property you're building, the noise you're making, you know, just being a good neighbor.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. What we'll do is we'll go on to the next person, and then we'll go out to public comment after all three have discussed and have answered any questions we may have. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And let's move to Bill Ragsdale Cronin. Bill, if you'd like to say something before I ask if anybody has questions.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, Bill Ragsdale, Cronin, Carlton Drive. As I'm getting older and sort of moving towards retirement, I think it's time to pay back to the city a little bit. We've been here about 13 years. My wife actually grew up on Carlton Drive from a relatively young age. I don't remember exactly when they moved here, but she's basically a lifelong resident of Carlton Drive and Delray Oaks. And the Planning Commission being an apolitical position, it's an good way to help the city. You don't get kind of stuck up in some political stuff that can make people uncomfortable. I've got a career in mechanical, building, construction, you kind of name it, I've done it. Understand that the position is looking at obviously building permit applications, making sure they meet the city guidelines and such, looking at the general plan, also weighing in possibly on items in the Fort Ord expansion or the Fort Ord property and what people want to do with that area. So that's kind of where I'm looking at it. I just want to try to give back to the city.
Great, thank you. Let's start. Pat, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, John?
No.
Okay, Scott? No?
No, I have no questions.
Okay, thanks. Kim?
Yes, I will ask you the same question. So can you talk about your examples or descriptions of what you think of as sustainable building?
For sustainable building, as the gentleman mentioned, water catchment, excuse me, solar panels, use of recycled materials while available. More in the residential side. If you get into commercial, I would look to LEED certification. You can't really set minimums, but you've got copper, silver, and gold, and I think platinum. Platinum being the highest, copper being the lowest. I think if you push towards anything commercially to get at least a bronze or silver LEED certification, that brings sustainability into the picture. Again, recycled materials, and that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah.
Great. And then your thoughts on the ADU ordinance that will be coming through the Planning Commission?
I think we would have to look at density. How much of the property is being used for residential space. I know there's certain percentages that you're allowed and not allowed. Would have to obviously adjust that probably. Looking at setbacks, noise, and again, what the ADU is going to be used for. If it's, somebody's going to build one and make it market rent, we're not really doing much towards the housing problem. If it's going to be reduced rent or something like that, then, I think you might be able to be a little more creative in your policies.
Great, thank you.
So I too will ask the same questions. How familiar are you with the water situation and how it would relate to Planning Commission activities?
Well, as we've talked before, I've been involved in water, wastewater, literally my entire life. My father owned a water company. I spent 39 years working for M1W before it was M1W. Fairly versed in the water politics of the area. I believe that the Pure Water Monterey is providing a good product and the expansion should move forward. I do believe that at some point down the road, there's going to need to be the third leg of the stool, as they've always talked about, and that's going to be some form probably of a desal plant. Certainly not this monstrous, horribly expensive thing that Cal-Am's talking about, but eventually we're going to have to add some water back into the system. You can't recycle forever. It just doesn't work. Because when you recycle, there's always a certain amount of water that's lost in the process. So eventually you run out of water. So you have to add some back in the system. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm fairly well versed on the rest of it that goes along with it. Delray Oaks is reading the paper the other day, the Sam Farr's taking kind of a poke at Marina Coast Water District, who I believe is our water purveyor for the Fort Ord property. So that could be a bit of an issue going forward, but if he was successful in what he wants to do and Water Management District took it over, it probably would be a moot point.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
And then what is the one thing you would like to see accomplished if you were, oh, sorry, that was a different question. Sorry.
Oh.
What do you think the biggest concern is for the city?
For me, it's sustainability. I think at some point, we worry about budgets, we worry about costs. At some point, I think there's got to be, and I'm not sure balancing on the back of the Fort Ord property is certainly not the total solution, but I think you have to balance sustainability, affordable housing, and the city being viable financially. And so I think that's all got to be looked at when you start looking at the forward properties and frankly, some of the other unused properties in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any last comments?
No, I'm good.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
So I thought I saw Martin Levy.
Correct.
There you are. All
Yeah.
right.
So let me turn on my video here.
Great.
Yeah.
So would you like to make some comments? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm applying for the Planning Commission open slot, and I'd like to be part of the city. And I've lived on the peninsula since '92, grew up in the Bay Area, have a few different degrees, a few different certifications, worked for Pacific Bell Public Sector for 15 years, worked for Pacific Bell AT&T for 21, was involved in some Fort Ord projects, have a rental house in Santa Rosa, worked with their planning department, have to say, for a relatively, it's a bigger city, it's excellent, it was good. Lived in Pebble Beach, did a development there. I found the County of Monterey pretty easy to work with. Not a contractor or anything, but I did it and they did it. But apparently now with COVID, it's difficult. Now, the city of Delray Oaks is excellent, bar none. But in a way, it's easier because it's smaller, but still, you know, and I love the police department. Officer Baza is great. But anyway, so yeah, I'm very interested in keeping an open mind and helping Delray Oaks move forward in a balanced way. Balanced meaning, okay, so economic development, keeping the city beautiful, like keeping it as it is now, and then also progressing forward, and then taking into account the environment, and also listening to other people's ideas, because oftentimes other people's ideas are really good, including other people around, other citizens. So trying to keep an open mind and be flexible and contribute and help. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Thanks, Martin. Pat, any questions?
None, thank you.
John?
No.
Scott?
No questions.
Okay. Kim?
All right, Martin. So same question. Can you talk to me about sustainable development and how you view sustainable development?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a balance to me. For example, we have lots of ideas. The city has lots of ideas. I talked with Allison and Scott about Fort Ord development and maybe moving some of the businesses over there and creating a downtown here or something like that. Sustainability to me doesn't just have to do with imposing rules on development because we want the best developers, but it does have to do with things like you can do very practical things. Actually, Valma talked about it. Like you can require extra insulation, and I do that myself. That saves a lot of energy. You can put in gray water systems, and I think Allison put one of those in catching rainwater and that sort of thing. Those are really good ideas for new developments. I think solar is a great idea. Mandating solar to me is imposing another tax on development. So we have to take a look at it, keep an open mind to it, but we have to take a look at whether that, is something we want to impose or not. But encouraging people to put in solar if it makes sense. If, for example, they have air conditioning. My brother is a big plumbing contractor. And I said, what does it make sense to put in an HVAC? He said, it makes sense if you have an air conditioner and you use a lot of electric power. So if you use a lot of electric, then solar makes sense. So that sort of thing.
Okay.
So yeah, long-winded answer.
Right. No, thank you.
I don't know enough content there, but yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you. And then again, the ADU ordinance that's going to be coming through. Can you give me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can. And I'm building an ADU and I got approved and I just complied with all the laws and I put it in. And on that ADU, I'm putting in like extra insulation, an HVAC system, and I'm putting in a gray water system. And those aren't things that are mandated, but I did have to do some of that stuff to get the water credits. So this is my opinion on ADUs. They're state mandates. We just have to comply with them. And also, in my opinion, property owners, they're paying the property tax. The city isn't and somebody else isn't. They should be allowed to develop their property how they want to, as long as it complies with state and local laws, which are already in place. So I don't like a lot of restrictions on property owners unless they're doing something that is obviously causing a problem, but it's their property. Property rights, isn't that like part of the Constitution or something? But it's part of the state though. The state has specific mandates and they're very like lenient now about everything you can do. You can put in a garage. You don't have to have much distance to the fence. And I'm in favor of all those Gavin Newsom things. We need to figure out a way. That's part of sustainability. We have to increase supply. You can't pose like 1 million restrictions on land use and then say, oh, why is there no housing supply? So I agree with Gavin Newsom on that one. Maybe not with everything on Gavin Newsom, but on that, I think it wasn't a bad idea. So that's
Okay.
it.
Great. Thank you.
All right. And Martin, I have the same questions. Tell me about water and how it relates to the city and planning commission activities.
Okay, so I was on the grand jury in Monterey County, and one of my tasks was investigating water, and it was the most difficult thing I've ever tried to understand. So I'm so far from understanding that. But you and I have talked about it, and I think you had some good ideas. And I do think that water recycling, you said that they were doing some water recycling and wastewater recycling. I think that's a great idea. Because if we're throwing away 70%, we can recycle some of it. That's a really good idea. I think gray water systems are a good idea. I think it's worth exploring the Callahan takeover. It's not going to be too expensive, but that's such a hot topic. And I'm a free market advocate, but on the other hand, I've lived in cities that have had city-run water, and it's so much better and cheaper. So I think it's worth taking a look and keeping an open mind about that sort of thing. And exploring all the other ideas, desalinization plant, if that makes sense, I guess economically, but it seems like it's so expensive. But it's, I mean, I don't even know that we have any input on that sort of thing, but that's about it.
All right, thanks. And what do you see as the greatest concern for our city?
First of all, it's a beautiful city. Like aesthetically beautiful. There's a lot of trees and it's safe and it's clean and it's got so many good things for it. So number one is making sure that that exists. But number two is, we've talked about this before, is establishing kind of some progress in a unique identity for the city, because we don't really have an identity. And it'd be kind of neat if we could somehow figure out with a four-door development and maybe a potential downtown to develop some type of identity for the city, whatever people decide that identity could be, or whatever it naturally could occur to. So that would be, those would be my priorities.
Great, thank you. Any last comments, Martin?
No, thank you for your time though.
Thank you. All right. So let's go back to the council. Any last comments, concerns, questions? Pat?
None, thank you.
John?
No.
Scott?
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate what I said before. The quality of the candidates is just really incredible. All three are very highly qualified. And thank you for putting in an application and wanting to step up and serve the city. I appreciate all your answers. I know all three candidates. I've spoken with them, and I also reached out to all of your references. I appreciate the comments that you made. I also appreciate the questions that were asked by Mayor Kerr and Councilmember Shirley. And it's going to be a very, very difficult choice. But overall, thank you so much for stepping up and wanting to serve the city.
Thanks, Scott. So traditionally, we have done ballot votes where we each let Karen know our votes. But after discussing those with Alex, we want to be more open in our voting so everyone understands who votes for who, rather than having to look at the minutes the next month. So what I'd like to do is start with Ms. Shirley and have you tell us who your vote is for, if that's okay with everybody.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, my vote is going to be for Bill Ragsdale Cronin.
Okay, and Scott Donaldson.
Caught me off guard a little bit there. Yes, very difficult choice for all the reasons that I just discussed, but my choice is Mike Berger.
Great. Before I go to John, I just want to also remind everyone that this is to replace Scott. So it's only a 2-year term, whereas we will have three or four spots available in May for the full 4-year term. So for those that aren't voted tonight, there will be another opportunity with more spots coming up soon. So sorry about that. John.
Mike Berger.
Okay, Pat?
Mike Berger, please.
Okay, and my vote goes to Bill Ragsdale Cronin. So I'd like to congratulate Mike Berger on his appointment to the Planning Commission. And I would like to invite Martin and Bill to please reapply in May for the 3 positions that will be open then, or 4. Karen, 3 or 4?
4.
Okay, so 4 positions then. But again, iterating what Councilman Donaldson said, thank you so much. You guys are all very qualified, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're gonna move on to item 6E. Consider nomination of 1 resident to the sign subcommittee. So what has happened with the sign subcommittee is Councilwoman Shirley is now a council person. So we are needing the makeup of the committee was 2 council people, 2 planning commissioners, and 2 residents. So now we have 3 council members, 2 planning commissioners, and 1 resident. I would like to bow out. So Mr. Gagliotti and Ms. Shirley can continue on the sign ordinance or sign committee. And rather than consider I'm looking at my notes, consider a nomination, what I would like to do is have a discussion about directing staff to announce the opening to the public, and then that would come back to us at the next meeting. So any council comments? Pat? I'll get right there, John.
Are you saying that we would vote on this next meeting?
Yeah, so what we need to do is direct staff to make an announcement to the residents that there is a spot open on the sign committee.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I was just wondering, is it still going to be a Brown Act meeting if it's just, I guess it would be because you and I were the council members, you Mayor and I were the council members, and then Kim was and so now Kim. Okay. I totally agree. I think I like your idea and I support that. I'm just kind of wondering if we could broaden the discussion, is there a way to make that meeting so that it doesn't necessarily, to me, it's restricted in its movements and how fast I think decisions can be made. And I think the momentum is lost in that because everything has to be so announced. And we've had, I think, 2 or 3 meetings canceled because we either didn't announce correctly or we couldn't get a quorum or whatever like that. And it just seems like we've added all this overhead to the meeting for what I think is a very simple and very transparent and a very effective, the work that's been done is very, very effective. Is there any way that maybe we could at this moment, or maybe we have to agendize it and take it up next meeting, and reconstructing that and making it a meeting that doesn't have to be hindered with the Brown Act, or hindered is probably not the right word, but at least kind of governed with by the Brown Act.
So Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, but that would mean we couldn't have 2 council and 2 planning commissioners, correct?
That's correct. And I think when this subcommittee was created, there was a provision that it would be subject to the Brown Act. Certainly, It's something that can be agendized for February. I think the action before you is to make the announcement, but it might make sense next month to discuss the candidate and have the next action item say, how do we make these meetings more effective? And that way we
Yeah, we need to do something. I mean, because look, we're all being very, very transparent. And everybody knows. I mean, nobody's trying to, do anything nefarious there. But the rules are slowing down the entire process. I mean, I think we're almost a year now into this subcommittee, and I think we could have probably solved it all in a few meetings. So,
Well, and I also think that there has been a delay since the election, right? Because we haven't figured it out, and we
just keep
deal with other things.
I mean, there's a number of reasons of why this keeps getting, pushed back, and it's all pancaking into over a year again in a meeting or in a subcommittee that I think the goal of the subcommittee could have been solved much quicker, I think.
Okay.
So, or the outcome.
Okay, let's move on to Scott. Any questions?
No questions. I'm tracking with all that, and I think that's a good process.
Okay. Ms. Shirley.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to reach out for another resident. And I think if we can be a little bit more focused, and I think we understand where we're going. We are getting closer to the end. I don't think we have a lot of work to do before we can wrap it up. So now that we've gotten this far, I think, having a complete committee, I think we should be able to get it done pretty quickly.
Okay. I spoke with Mary Truxas, who at one point wanted to bow out, and I spoke with her about that decision, and she said if we could make the meetings at a time before 5 o'clock, she would be happy to continue. So that's also another consideration. And yeah, so I will bow out, but I had a very large action item, and I will finish that up and I will send it all to the chair if this is the will of the council. So on that, let me go out to the public on this and see what kind of comments they have, and then we'll come back. Any public comments on the sign subcommittee? Excuse me, the sign ordinance subcommittee. Jim Clark.
Oh, okay. Oh no. Okay, I guess I'm there. My screen just did all kinds of crazy things. I guess I would just want to have you, and you don't have to answer me or anything because you don't, but look back at is this accomplishing what you hoped it would accomplish, or has this just turned into a big debacle? I mean, the planning commission had come up and done their work and come up with a sign ordinance, and then it went to the city council, and then the public got involved with some comments. I just wonder if you're just trying to make an elephant when all you need is, a horse. And so I just ask you to reevaluate, are you tracking the way you want to track, or should you put this back where it probably belongs with the planning commission and let them come up with the sign ordinance? So just, look back retrospectively and see if, that isn't where it really belongs. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. What I would like to make a motion to direct staff to go out with an announcement for a new resident for the sign ordinance subcommittee, and I will back off. I will bow out.
That's a motion. I'll second the motion, or do we just need consensus to direct staff?
Oh.
Do we need to vote on it, or do we just give you
Alex?
consent?
I would just, to make it clear, just vote on it briefly.
All right, okay, then I second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Karen, could you please do a roll call?
Councilmember Gagliotti,
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley,
Aye.
Councilmember Donaldson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lintel,
Aye.
Mayor Kerr.
Aye. So it passes unanimously. And so just to make sure we're clear for legal counsel and our acting city manager, so we are hoping to have anyone interested to come to us at the February meeting for consideration.
That's right.
Very good, Mayor. And we will post it as usual on social media and email, our normal channels of communication with the community.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. The next item is 6F, consider creation of council subcommittee for hiring of city manager. So when legal counsel and acting city manager and I were discussing this, we did not know the status of Mr. Pick and whether he was coming back or not. I felt it was prudent to have a plan in place in case he didn't. For those of you that may not know, we did receive a letter of resignation from Mr. Pick yesterday that will go into effect on February 1st. So this is auspicious timing for this. It's unfortunate. Well, I mean, actually, I know we all congratulate him on continuing to work at a federal level. He did not indicate to me what that was, if he was continuing on with the job that he has or another one, but I know we're all fortunate that he is at that level helping our country. So on that note, so when we were talking about creation of a council subcommittee for hiring, it had to do with, or one idea would be to come up with timing and items that go along with that, with either a subcommittee, or it could be done publicly, what can be done publicly with the entire council. So I think this is just really the beginning of a conversation that we need to have based on the fact that it's coming quicker than we all thought. So on that, I'd like to go out to council. So Ms. Lintel, any comments?
Yes, I guess the subcommittee of council members could only be 2 people because of the Brown Act. But I believe that in vetting, let's say we have 15 applicants, we need to vet and not interview each of the applicants. There will be some that are more outstanding than the others. And I feel this vetting process should also include our city attorney, Alex Lorca. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. John?
Yeah, could you help me, Mayor, clarify kind of the scope of what either a subcommittee or a hearing, I guess that's what it would be, right? To capture public input. What's the scope? What is it that we are trying to accomplish? And then a second question, and maybe this is to Alex or anybody else, how, I mean, Seaside has actually gone out and got they went through a process and got another, a city manager. Salinas just did it. I mean, how did other cities go through this process? What were some of the other examples there? And
So,
yeah.
So I can offer just the conversations that I've had with both members of Seaside and of Salinas in their process.
Yeah.
So Salinas obviously has a lot more money to be able to do this. And so, you know, they hired somebody, they went out, they did a whole search. When I spoke with a council person in Seaside, what they suggested was there are a couple of key publications that rather than us hiring an entity to do that, we come up with the job description, we come up with an advertisement, and we put it out to ICMA, which is the International City Managers Association. It could go out to the California League of Cities. And so there's an advertisement. It's a pretty small field, and I think that could be a logical, less expensive route for us. But what I was thinking, I have never hired a city manager. I know Pat was part of a process. but I have done a lot of hiring. So it makes sense that there's timing issues, right? It's about getting an advertisement out if we choose to go that way. And then, like Councilwoman Lintel, how do we look at all of the applicants? I don't know. Do we have a lot of applicants? And then I would personally like to see like the top 3 candidates as we all determine. I think it's important that all 5 of us are included in that, as well as Alex. From there, maybe we have a rubric where we, identify the different people and the strengths and the weaknesses based upon each other. And then do a public Zoom meeting, with the top 3, where they come, they present to the city. Well, they don't literally come, of course, but they would present to the city and they would answer questions for an hour. That's how we do it at MPS, which, everybody has buy-in, everybody's able to see the top candidates. So that's one idea. But again, it has to do with, do we want 2 people working on this, or do we all want to have a public hearing and look at, the project description and the way forward we all want to go?
And can I ask, and through the, do you mind that we have kind of this cross discussion here rather than just, I just want to be able to speak with you directly. So we'll just continue this format. Can I ask this? Do we need to do this? We have an interim city manager. He seems to appear to have picked up. What, in your mind, what's the justification of going to the street, going and out? I'm a process person, and I think it's important to, this is an important position for the city. I'd like to go out and see who else is available. I would love if Jeff would like to apply to be a part of the process as well. But I think, we've had a complicated history with our city managers, and I want to make sure that we go through an entire process. Okay. And have a public, yeah. That to me is kind of more of a gating question that maybe we put before the county, is that, or not the county, but the council, and ask, do we feel that a process to replace, in both cases in Seaside and in Salinas, and interesting enough, Cruz was involved in both of those. There was a vacancy, but in our case, we don't have a vacancy. We have somebody filling the role, and they picked it right up, and it's basically been seamless. And I believe that they're doing a very, very good job, and I'm comfortable with that. And so at this point, I'm like, what's the need? So, okay. Maybe that's kind of a gating question. Okay. Well, let's keep, it's not up to me, but I do think, yeah, so let's hear what, how about Scott? Scott, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's important that we look at what other cities have done or are doing to pick their city manager and what kind of process they've gone through, just like you were both discussing. But we do have some institutional knowledge here where either Councilmember Lintel or others were involved in the process in hiring Dino Pick, and maybe we might be able to glean some good ideas from that. And I think that's just as important as going out to other cities.
Okay. Ms. Shirley.
Yeah, I think it's important that we establish a process, and this has nothing to do how acting city manager Hoyne is doing. I think he's, I've really enjoyed working with him. So it's not about a person right now. It's really about the position of city manager for Delray Oaks. And I think we owe it to our city to do a complete process, which is going out for applicants and looking at all of them. Whether we do it in a subcommittee, I would like to see a full job description. I'd like to make sure that we're looking equally at all of the applicants. So whether we're using a rubric, again, this is a big decision for our city, especially with where we're at right now. And so I'd like to see a more formal process, one that's very thoughtful. And so whether we have a subcommittee that's made up of 2 council members, or, you know, we do this as a whole council, I guess I'm pretty flexible with that. Because I'd really like to hear from everyone on the council, and we should all be able to contribute to the city manager that we want to hire. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. So let's go out to the public. I see Dennis Allion.
Hi.
All right.
So I was on the council when we had to go out and make choices. And first of all, I really like your idea. You do need to have a good process. We use processes too. I don't know that they were necessarily very good. I did not, without disclosing anything, the one choice of city council, our city manager that was made turned out to not be the right choice. And I'm happy to say he was not my choice. But at any rate, you know, it is difficult, and it's very difficult. You get these people in front of you, you're going to be interviewing them, and they're all well qualified. So it boils down to a very difficult decision that you have to make. And you can go ahead and ask the city of Salinas and Seaside what process they used. It's going to boil down to your best personal judgment based on the information that you've gathered about that individual. So I think number one, it's extremely important that you get background checks. Extremely important. If we had better background checks, I think we may have made a different decision on that one hire. So you have a tough job ahead of you. I think you're right to go out and find as many applicants as you can. I think our acting city manager is a great individual. We're blessed to have him. And I know that he has hit the ground running, and God bless him for the amount of work that he's putting in to keep things moving for the city. But again, I agree with your recommendation that you should go ahead with a formal process, and good luck with the decision making, because you're going to find it very, very difficult. You should get some excellent candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Any other public comments? I see no hands in the chat. And I see no, oh, there's Jim Clark. Jim, did you have?
I know I'm trying to, I've made a personal goal of not getting into the typical thing of people that came up to do public comment when you were first elected 4 years ago. And I'm struggling right now because of the fact that your first campaign involved completely humiliating Jerry Edelin, and that something that you've never apologized for publicly. And now you're sitting there, and I'm sure having a sip of wine and gloating that you have successfully run off one of the most talented, well-mannered, nice men that you will ever meet in your life. You know, this goes back to your behavior when he asked for his leave of absence. And, you know, you say having a city manager is a big decision. Well, all I hear from all this, Mayor, and what a lot of other, well, actually, I should call you Allison, since you're on a first name basis with all the other city council people and not showing them the respect they deserve either, is that, as you said, this is a big decision. Well, it wouldn't have to be a big decision if you didn't feel a need, at least again, this is what it appears like out here. You couldn't control Dino and you did everything you could to get rid of him. And I bet as we watch this unfold over the next 6 months or whatever it is, we're going to find somebody that is will not even be allowed to apply for the job if he doesn't fit a certain parameter that gives you the ability to control where things are going. And I'm really sad about that. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Jim. Mary Solsang.
Hi, Madam Mayor and Council. I completely support the idea that you would have a process for hiring a city manager. And I also support a strong process for background check for whoever that city manager might be. I think that Mr. Hoyne has been doing a great job as a city manager, as far as I can tell from the outside. And would hope that he would be one of the applicants. But I think it's important to see who's out there and to take a hard look at that. We're a small city, but we have important issues and we have important business before the city council. And I think that a city manager who is a strong city manager with a good background and a good sense of experience would be very important and a very good choice. And I think we can only achieve that through having a process that the city council follows. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Gary.
Hello, Gary Krieger, Quindell. Actually, really, I can't add much more than what Mary just said. That was exactly what I was thinking. Jeff Hoyne's done a great job, it's hard to imagine why we wouldn't want to go through the process and compete it. I think he'll be very competitive, but this is you don't just, it's not something we just bestow, right? We have a process, we use it, we look at candidates, we vet them, and I'm assuming it probably will not just be the mayor's decision. I'm assuming the other people in the council get a chance to vote as well. So anyway, yes, I fully support the idea that we do need to go out, and however you want to do it is probably not as important, but yes, going out and looking at candidates is the only thing that would be really fair to the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Any other public comments? I am not seeing any hands in chat or on the screen. So what I'd like to do is come back to the council and see what you would like to do. Pat?
Yes, I think that our current acting city manager, Jeff Hoyne, has done an outstanding job in moving into a difficult position. However, I think I like the idea of the process. As I stated earlier, as far as vetting, if we have numerous applicants, I would like to see Alex Lorca be a part of that vetting committee. And I hope that Jeff Hoyne will submit an application for that position. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
I'm in agreement with Pat and actually a lot of the comments that I heard is that I'm convinced that a process is what we need. But I don't yet know what, I mean, do we need to come up with a process, or are we tonight deciding whether we're going to do kind of a subcommittee? Are we coming up with a format tonight? Is that what you're asking for? Or is that what the staff's asking for?
We're asking for a conversation about how to address this. I mean, yeah.
Okay, then, I mean, I'm in agreement. I think I agree that a process is needed, and willing to support however we work it out.
Okay. Scott?
Yes, I'm very much a process person, and I believe one is needed for all the reasons that were stated. And in addition to that, one of the big reasons is it adds legitimacy to the process. So I'm very much in favor of it.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Shirley.
Yes, as stated before, I think we do need a process. I think we do need to collectively, whether it's on a subcommittee with two, again, come up with what we are asking for in a city manager. So a job description, I think we need to have a good understanding of what we're looking for, so that we do get applicants that that fit that description. So I'm not sure what the best way to do that is, because I'm with all of you. I've never hired a city manager either. So I don't know if we have to decide right now if we need a subcommittee, and if so, who is on it, or if we just, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's from. Yeah.
So one idea would be, Pat, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let me finish and then we'll get to you.
Thank you.
Sure. So one idea would be we have a special meeting where we hash it through. You know, we look at job descriptions, you know, each of us go out and find a job description of a city manager, and we talk through what a process makes sense for all of us, right? You know, I've heard background checks. I've heard Alex being a part of. I've heard, you know, everyone should take a look at all of the applications. I think we could hammer this out, you know, with a little time and a little elbow grease that we can all agree on. Pat?
Yes, I'm sure Karen has the information that we used at the time we hired Dino, and perhaps the description of the duties of the city manager. And also at the time we hired Dino, we had questions that we would ask, and it was kind of divided into the council members, and this was all done in closed session, where we interviewed 3, and let's say I asked a set of questions of maybe 3 or 4, and I had to ask each candidate the same question. And that was true of the other council members. Whatever questions they asked the first candidate that they interviewed, they had to ask the same questions of the others. And I thought that was a very good idea, because we could do a comparison. And so I would like to see you working with Karen on this. And I think she will have a lot of good input for us. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Those are great suggestions. Kim?
I just think we should also maybe go to the public too at some point. Maybe when we have a draft of the job description, I'd like to hear from the public, because the city manager interacts a lot with, you know, they are the face of Delray Oaks, and so I'd like to hear from our residents as well, what they're interested in seeing in a city manager too. So. And I'd be happy to volunteer on a subcommittee if that's where we're going with this.
Okay. Pat, did you still have your hand up, or?
No, okay.
Okay. So one suggestion might be to ask Karen to put together whatever materials may have been used the last time. Karen, do you have those? Could you find those?
Yes.
Okay. And maybe we have her bring those back, and we allocate 20 minutes, half an hour next meeting to review and the timeline. That's just an idea. I'm just throwing it out there. John?
I like it. So maybe we formalize that and make a motion and direct staff. That
I'll
sounds like
entertain a motion.
Yeah, I mean, that's an action. Let's do it. So let's on the mayor's recommendation, let's have Karen collect all the materials that was used to select Dino. prepare that and get that out to us. And then at the next meeting, we agendize, we agendize basically a discussion on coming up with the next steps from there.
I second.
May I make a friendly amendment?
Yeah, please.
Could we also, what I would also like to do is ask Karen to find deadlines for advertisements
Okay.
for ICM, California League of Cities, and those are the ones that are coming to mind.
Okay.
And then that way we have that information if we choose to go that route.
Okay. I accept the amendment.
Thank you.
Pat, you can
Okay,
accept it.
I second the next, the amendment.
Okay, so, wow. Okay, so for me to reiterate that, we're providing, or we're asking for the process and the documents from the previous city manager hiring, as well as appropriate advertising dates for the International City Managers Association and the League of California Cities monthly publication. Karen, can you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Gagliotti.
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley.
Aye.
Councilmember Donaldson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lintel.
Aye.
Mayor Kerr.
Aye. All right, so that's unanimous. Thank you so much for walking through that.
That was good. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of awkward. And thank you, Karen. So tied to that is 6G, which is consider city manager and chief of police contract extension. Tied to my conversations with Alex and Jeff was to ensure that Jeff and our acting city manager and our acting police chief have enough buffer that they are covered, right? Because the original contract for Dino went to February 16th. And so if we wait until the next council meeting, they will have gone 2 weeks without contract coverage. And so what I would like to have a discussion on is, Alex and I have discussed this, and he can put together a one-page contract extension that provides for that wiggle room until we decide A, our process, and B, when we have a formal city manager. So to have that discussion, let's go to Pat.
Okay, I would like to ask Alex if it can be kind of a non-ending, because we don't know how long it's going to take us to find a city manager. And so I would like to have it an indefinite period. Is that possible, Alex?
That is possible. We can draft it as such that, you know, there would be a 30-day termination notice. And so when we knew the new city manager contract was to take effect, that we could provide the 30 days and go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Good idea. John.
Yeah, Councilmember Lentel's idea was what I was going to ask. So I have no questions, and I support this. I appreciate doing this for both our staff members.
Well, and for the city to make sure that they're
exactly.
that they're covered. Mr. Donaldson.
Yes, I completely agree with what Councilmember Lintel had to say. I think if we don't do that, we're going to have to come back and revisit it anyways, because we're not quite sure what the timeline is going to be. So that makes a lot of sense, and I support it.
Great. Ms. Shirley.
Yes, I'm in support of that as well. Sounds good to me.
Ms. Lintel, do you have your hand up again?
No.
Okay, I can take it down for, or.
I thought you were taking it down each time.
Oh, sorry. I need to be more regular about that, don't I? Okay, so the other thing, the other nuance with this is we need to have it done before February 16th. So what Alex and I discussed was to agendize this first thing for our strategic planning meeting next Tuesday.
All right.
So I want to go out to the public on this, but you know, consider that. Otherwise we would have to do a special meeting. So let's go out to the public. Any comments on city manager and chief of police contract extension?
I would.
You have, there's a thing to raise your hand.
I don't know
Oh,
who's talking.
Me, that's Mike Berger. I'm struggling here.
Okay, Mike, you have 3 minutes.
It's one of those things of if it isn't broken, don't fix it. And I know that's a temporary solution, but I've heard some good comments about the work that he's done in a position that he's been thrown into rather quickly. And you know, I don't, even though it's a small town, it doesn't mean that his job is any smaller as chief of police. But if he's willing to do it and he's happy to do it, and it doesn't take away from his responsibilities, other responsibilities, and yeah, it buys time, and that way there's no pressure to make haste decisions. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments? I am not seeing any hands in chat or on the screen. So I want to bring it back to the council, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move that, because I'm totally just dropped it. I move that we direct Alex to come up with, I guess, an open-ended extension to the current the interim city managers and the chief of police contracts.
I second.
All right.
Do we need to stipulate in there that it has to be before that date in February?
I think
I'll make a friendly moment. Yeah, I do. I think that needs to be in there. So and that all this work be done before the February 16th meeting.
It's actually February 2nd.
February 2nd meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, I still second with the amendment.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other council comments before we go to vote? Seeing none, Karen, would you like me to reiterate that, or?
No, I've got it.
Okay.
Yep. Councilmember Gagliotti,
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley,
Yes.
Councilmember Donaldson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lintel,
Aye.
Mayor Kerr.
Aye. All right, so it's unanimous to provide a open-ended extension for our two acting city manager and chief of police, an indefinite extension to be prepared and ready to go for February 2. Alex, any questions, comments?
Nope.
You
Thank
got
you.
it. Okay. Thank you. So let's move on to item 6H. Thank you all for that. Consider appeal of the November 10, 2020 Planning Commission decision regarding Delray Oaks Gardens Center CUP 1505. I'd like to, before we get going, we need a couple of folks to recuse themselves.
So actually, I wanted to speak on that, Mayor. So all the way through this entire process, when I was chairing the Planning Commission, I had to recuse myself due to materiality. And in that process, I was in the process of actually purchasing the home that I lived in my whole life, or lived in from when I was younger. That has since changed. The ownership is still held with my folks. I purchased a house in Carmel, but I'm just living here, so I'm just a resident of Delray Oaks, but I'm not actually a landowner in Delray Oaks. So I believe I believe that excludes me actually from the materiality issue.
Alex, can you just make sure we're all clear on that?
Yeah, so the new 500-foot rule applies to home ownership with respect to leasehold interests. There's a material interest where the decision will change the termination date of any lease that's in place, increase or decrease the potential rental value of the property, increase or decrease the rental value of the property, and the official has the right to sublease the property, change the official's actual or legal allowable use of the property, or impact the official's use and enjoyment of the real property. So if none of those things are found, then it's not a conflict.
No, my folks still have complete control of the house, kind of, I guess, fortunately now, but unfortunately right now, so.
Okay. And Pat, do you have something similar?
Yes, I do. I am no longer an owner. My son owns the property, and I've discussed this with Alex, and so it's not necessary for me to recuse myself.
Okay. And Scott?
Yeah, clearly I'll have to recuse myself just because of my involvement with the Planning Commission and the decision. But before I do that, I talked about it last meeting. I know this is an emotional issue with a lot of folks, and a lot of times people will accentuate the differences, whatever they may be. And I like to look at common ground. And I think with this situation, you're seeing a lot of consistency with what the appeal wants and what the CUP required. And that's all I wanted to say.
Okay.
Just a moment. Okay, Alex.
I was going to raise my hand as well. Recusal needs to happen at the outset of the hearing. And to Councilmember Donaldson, as I told George Jackshaw, it's not that we don't love you, but you need to mute as well as stop the video on your device or your computer.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you know how to? Okay. So what I would like to do is, because we have an appellant and we have Mr. Maury, Jeremy will come to public comment later. Are you raising your hand for public comment? You're not on the council, so you're fine to stay. If that was your concern. Okay. So what I would like to do is I would like to start this with a report from our acting city manager. And then I would like to go out to our appellant, and I would like to keep it with between 5 to 7 minutes, if that works for you, Alice. And then I would like to go to Mr. Maury for the exact same time to be able to discuss, then go out to the public, and then come back and provide each of them an equal amount of time for rebuttal. And then the council can ask questions along the way. Alice, do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. I am not going to confine myself to 5 or 7 minutes.
How long do you think you'll need?
At least 15. I have a statement to make, and it takes 15 minutes. And I deserve to get that time.
All right. Well, on that note, go ahead, start.
No. Oh, you're not going to have Acting City Manager Hoyne make his statement?
You're correct. So Acting City Manager Hoyne, if you can kick us off with your report, then we will go to the appellant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and residents and visitors. On November 10th of 2020, the Delray Oaks Planning Commission held a hearing to consider a new conditional use permit for the Delray Oaks Garden Center. The new conditional use permit requested that the lease boundary areas be increased retroactively to cover areas that the garden center had encroached upon outside the leasehold, as well as allow for expanded hours of operation on Sundays throughout the year. Initially, our staff recommendation, which was initiated prior to me coming into the acting city manager's office, was to grant the CUP to the Planning Commission. And then the process by which we would address many of the issues that our residents have, that our planning commissioners have and have talked about, was to enforce those things through the renegotiation of the lease. So after the planning commission approved the CUP was appealed by Ms. Green. Since that time, because of the public comment that was at the planning commission meeting and the planning commissioner's comments, the fact that the ownership of the garden center failed to meet with us when we wanted to talk about those conditions and set up discussions about those things that we wanted to enforce within the lease and start that process. And because of the complex issues related to the garden center and the property there, staff is now actually recommending that we grant the appeal, which would reverse the planning commission's approval of the CUP. And I'd like to say just two more things before this starts off. One, it should be noted that while the agenda item deals strictly with the appeal, and we should be within the scope of the appeal of the CUP and the information contained in the CUP, the city is well aware of the compliance issues related to the current CUP and the lease agreement. And we will address them in the appropriate venue, manner, and time. On a personal note, as the city manager, this is a problem that is at the top of my work list and at the top of staff's work list. I'd like to use an analogy. This is a spaghetti bowl full of agreements and leases and CUPs that have stacked up over the last several years. And it's a very complicated problem and process. There's nothing more than staff wants to do than to untangle all of that, but it has to go in a particular order. It has to go in regard to making sure everybody's rights are protected, that the city is doing right, both as a landlord, but also protecting our interests. And the one thing I'll say is, I don't think we're very far off, except for the encroached lease areas at the CUP. I believe there's what staff is recommending now, which is the granting the appeal. I think we're close, but I just want everyone to remember this is just the CUP appeal. Staff recommends granting the appeal, and just know that we're going to work on this very hard. It takes some time, and I would request patience for our staff to get through this and make things better than they are now. Thank you, Mayor.
Can you reiterate, so to keep the conversation about the appeal itself, the items I have are the lease boundary area and the expended hours of operation. Is there anything else from your perspective, Mr. Hoyne?
Mayor, the Sunday hours and the encroached lease area, or well.
Yes, it's okay. The lease boundary.
The lease boundaries, the Sunday hours, there have been discussions about four-tag routing and also access for trails that have been involved in the CUP. But in this particular instance, the two main areas are the discussion that you just talked about.
So what we're discussing this evening in regards to this appeal is the lease boundary area and the expanded hours of operations, and whether we're going to grant an appeal or not.
That's correct. The main issue is just, will we grant the appeal, or will we reverse the planning commission's decision?
Got it. Okay. So let's go out to Ms. Green.
Oh, okay. No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. John, did you have a question before?
I really want to hear what Ms. Green has to say. Why don't I do that? I will wait. I'll reserve my comments and my questions until after. She may actually raise some of the questions that I have. So
Okay, and then Mr. Maury will go. I will ask council if they have questions in between the two. Okay, Ms. Green, it's yours.
Thank you. Hello, this is Alice Angel Green speaking to you from my home on Saucedo Avenue in Delray Oaks. I am appealing the Planning Commission decision of November 10th, 2020, approving a conditional use permit for the Delray Oaks Garden Center. The Planning Commission, by approving agenda item 6A, quote, as submitted with all of the comments from tonight's meeting taken into account during the negotiation of lease, unquote. According to the consent agenda's description, gave the garden center after the fact permission for a fence, as well as permission to change its hours of operation. In the agenda packet for tonight's meeting is a letter from Acting City Manager Jeffrey Hoying recommending that my appeal be approved. I am glad to receive this recommendation, and I'm going to discuss a number of issues brought up by my appeal in the context of Mr. Hoying's letter. Mr. Hoying begins with a description of the request made by the Garden Center. Let's look at this description in the context of how agenda item number 6, section A, was written in both the canceled August 12th meeting, which I included as Exhibit D, and the November 10th meeting when the requests were discussed and approved, as well as the staff report for the November 10th meeting. Agenda item number 6, section A states, quote, requesting architectural review to receive after the fact permission for a fence previously erected and to amend hours of operation listed in original conditional use permit, unquote. The Garden Center's permit requests, the staff's description of those requests, and Mr. Hoying's letter all describe the requests as including after the fact permission to use the already encroached upon land. The agenda item, however, only mentions the fence, which, while part of the Garden Center's request, is by no means the essential substance of it. So what was actually voted on? Although not included in my packet, I now refer back to the quote referenced earlier from the Planning Commission consent agenda as included in the City Council's December 15th agenda packet. On page 4 of 5 in the consent agenda, it states, quote, motion to approve item 6A as submitted with all of the comments from tonight's meeting taken into account during the negotiation of lease, Delray Oaks Garden Center request to receive after the fact permission for a fence previously erected and amend the hours of operation listed in the original conditional use permit. So even though the agenda had seriously misrepresented the substance of the Garden Center's application, and even though the discrepancy was clear from the documents provided to the commissioners, it was the misrepresentation that was approved by a vote of 5-1. The charitable explanation is that this is an example of extreme sloppiness on the part of the staff and the commissioners, and not the sort of sloppiness that anyone should wish to see repeated. The serious nature of the Garden Center's application and the consequences of approving the request included in the application surely require more due diligence than was demonstrated here. Other less charitable explanations do suggest themselves, since the staff at least knew about the discrepancy since they themselves prepared documents which were not in agreement. The commissioners should have known the same if they had read them carefully. Mr. Hoying's letter next reminds us that the staff had recommended approving the Garden Center's application in November, and then says, quote, however, after public comment at the Planning Commission meeting, recurring compliance issues related to the original CUP and lease, and the failure of Garden Center ownership to meet with city staff to discuss these issues, Staff now recommends granting the appeal, which would reverse the Planning Commission's approval of ARC 20-03/CUP 14-08. Mr. Hoyne covers a lot of ground here, and to my mind, his remarks raise a very serious question. Why did staff recommend approval in November 2020 to begin with? First of all, at least some of the public comments referred to issues such as the reeking mess of leaking machinery right by the creek and the public easement that have been brought to the city's attention many times before this meeting. Anyone who walks by there can't miss it. So Mr. Hoyne and Ms. Harwain of Denise Duffy and Associates knew about it, as they both made clear in their remarks at the meeting on November 10th. And the commissioners knew about it, since they also brought the issue up repeatedly at the meeting. Frankly, it's common knowledge. This issue is not only a hazard to the health of the land and the water in clear violation of state environmental law, a public nuisance, and extremely ugly to boot, but also is in direct violation of several provisions of the Garden Center's lease, as well as Delray Oaks' own general plan. Both Mr. Hoyne and Commission Chair Donaldson insisted that remarks connected to cleaning up this mess were not the commissioner's direct concern at that time and would only be taken into consideration later when Mr. Hoyne was tasked with renegotiating the lease agreement. Mr. Hoyne stated that he had had discussions with Mr. Morey and Ms. Harwain about what he characterized as, quote, the long-term outcome of that shed in that area, unquote. Apparently, issues such as oil and gasoline leaking into the creek weren't immediately significant before in the decision to grant the Garden Center's application, according to staff, but they are now. Why? Mr. Hoyne's next reason for recommending granting my appeal is, quote, recurring compliance issues related to the original CUP and lease, unquote. If for no other reason than what was just discussed, the Garden Center's ongoing lack of compliance with the terms of its lease was already well known to the staff, at least by last November before the meeting. Additionally, Mr. Morey's claim in his request that he didn't know he needed a permit, even if the issue was just a fence outside the lease boundary, which clearly it wasn't, but even if it was, is another clear example of his, quote, recurring compliance issues, unquote. Since the need for a permit for any new structure, which would include a fence, is stated explicitly in the lease. So why is this an issue now all of a sudden when apparently it wasn't one before? Mr. Hoyne's reasons for recommending approval continue with, quote, and the failure of Garden Center ownership to meet with city staff to discuss these issues, unquote. In addition to stating at the November 10th meeting that he, Ms. Harwain, and Mr. Morey had discussed issues connected to the shed and its yard, Mr. Hoyne also, by his own admission at the November meeting, had spoken with Mr. Morey about his egregious encroachment on the north side of the lease boundary line. In fact, Mr. Hoyne used what he said was Mr. Morey's explanation of the reason for the odd-shaped boundary line as the only information he had regarding that area of encroachment. Mr. Hoyne admitted he had not read the lease, didn't know precisely where it could be located, and he clearly had not looked at any other relevant primary documents, including the staff report provided to the Planning Commission for their November 12th, 2014 meeting. The extensive report included the CEQA negative declaration prepared by Denise Duffy and Associates. The serious environmental reasons for the area's exclusion were explained numerous times to the commissioners, both verbally and in writing, when the original agreement with the Topes people was approved, an agreement that the Garden Center inherited and agreed to abide by. In fact, it was a necessary exclusion in order to make the use of a negative declaration possible. Neither the Garden Center lease signed by Mr. Morey in January of 2015, nor the staff report from November 2014 were included in the commissioner's packet, so they hadn't read them. And Mr. Hoyne admitted he hadn't read them. Anyone who had read them would know that the explanation Mr. Hoyne said he was given by Mr. Morey is totally inaccurate. According to Mr. Hoyne, Mr. Morey stated that the reason for the exclusion was that originally there did not seem to be any way he could use that area. But since he figured out a way he could use it, he went ahead with the encroachment. Mr. Hoyne, by accepting this explanation and using it as an answer to questions about the area, demonstrated a serious lack of judgment in blithely accepting the applicant's version of the issues, while also demonstrating a serious disregard for his job as acting city manager by not properly preparing for this important meeting. Ms. Harwain, a representative of Denise Duffy and Associates, the firm that prepared the CEQA negative declaration describing the critical environmental reason for why the area was excluded, just sat there and said nothing. As the council members may recall, in the packet I provided a while ago to the council and the staff discussing emails between Delray Oaks staff and folks representing the airport, there is an email from former city manager Pick, which describes Denise Duffy and Associates as, quote, the city's on-call planning staff, unquote. Ms. Harwain must not take representing her firm in its dealings with Delray Oaks very seriously, as evidenced by her remaining silent while her firm's work was being totally misrepresented by Mr. Hoyne. She clearly should have been prepared with an understanding of the work her firm did for the city that was directly relevant to this meeting. Otherwise, why was she even there? What was it exactly that she was being paid to do? That Mr. Hoyne would say that Mr. Morey had not discussed any of the issues raised by his request with Delray Oaks staff is contradicted by his own statements at the November 10th meeting. But let's assume for the sake of argument that he is correct and no discussions took place. Clearly, when he was recommending that the commissioners approve the Garden Center's application at that meeting, he was also aware that Mr. Morey had not talked to the staff. So again, I ask, why is this lack of discussion suddenly considered important when it wasn't a factor before? The city already knew about concerns and complaints by the residents. The city already knew that the Garden Center had violated its lease repeatedly. And Mr. Morey had already talked to Mr. Hoyne about at least some aspects of his request and lack of lease compliance. So why has Mr. Hoyne changed his mind regarding approving the Garden Center's requests? I'll tell you why. That approval got challenged because of some very extensive hard work on the part of a few residents, and he realized he didn't have a leg to stand on. I just have a few more remarks regarding the last paragraph of Mr. Hoyne's letter, and then I'm done. Mr. Hoyne's last paragraph states, quote, it should be noted that while this agenda item deals strictly with the appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of the conditional use permit application, the city is aware of compliance issues related to the current CUP and the lease agreement and will address them in an appropriate venue, manner, and time, unquote. I tell you what, how about using the methods already outlined in the lease, which is Exhibit 2 in my packet? Read it over. The city has quite a few remedies available to it that it could implement right now. What is it waiting for? Who's in charge here anyway? The Garden Center is the tenant. The city is the landlord. By its own failure to act thus far on compliance issues, Mr. Hoyne admits the city is aware of 12 of which he lists on page 2 of his letter, the city has shown that its concept of, quote, an appropriate venue, manner, and time, unquote, has so far meant no venue, no manner, and no time. The fact that Mr. Morey felt no need to come to the Planning Commission meeting where his application for a conditional use permit was being considered, or send anyone else to represent him, makes it clear that he considered approval a given. After all, the city has let him do whatever he wants so far, in spite of residents' concerns and complaints, as well as ongoing blatant violations of his lease and state environmental laws. And that belief was justified by the fact that, at the urging of Mr. Hoyne and Mr. Donaldson, the commissioners did approve his request by a vote of 5-1. And don't forget Ms. Harwain's role in this mess. Only Commissioner Krieger acknowledged the need for more information and inquiry before making any decisions. Although I do appreciate Mr. Hoyne's recommendation to approve my appeal, I don't appreciate what appears to me primarily as his attempt to cut off further discussion of garden center issues by trying to give the impression that the city now takes its own rules, responsibilities, and the concerns of residents seriously. As the information and arguments in my packet make clear, what I've mentioned in my remarks barely scratches the surface of the myriad of issues involved in the nightmare the garden center has become. And approval of this appeal should only be considered an initial step in the many that need to be taken by the city. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that was 16 minutes. And what I'd like to do is go out, John, if you're okay, I'd like to go to Mr. Morey. Mr. Morey, you have up to 16 minutes as well for a rebuttal.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. First of all, our business was considered a nightmare. This is just, I think its whole situation was blown out of proportion. We've been helping the people in not just the city, outside the city. We have provided a lot of service in the last 5 years. And I felt we are, really doing a good job. We have done a good job providing a service and products. And let me briefly explain to you guys how everything happened. Previous city manager, Mr. Dawson, the way he was managing a city, as all you know, that everything was shaking hands. And when I mentioned about when I started to move in, used to be a abandoned driving range. So I had to take on a big job to clean up a whole mess with about 5-6 feet tall. And there was a homeless living down there in the structure as well. A bunch of mice infested property, we cleaned up whole thing. And then, let's see, Mr. Dawson wanted me to drill well. And there was a well, old existing well. So we spent quite a bit of money to try to investigate where the well was. And Mr. Dawson's idea was to use credit. He wanted to use the water credit for his own home. So we did a lot of discussion. And one of the discussion was he wanted me to take up all the old driving range golfing net that was tall, and the telephone poles as well, all the way to Safeway. So if he suggested that if we take care of all the messy netting and telephone poles, he'll let me go beyond the boundary a little bit. He said, it's not that much anyway. So if you do that, I'll let you do that. Great. So we shook hands. That's what I did. It wasn't an easy job. It was a tall telephone pole and all the crystallized telephone pole. So it's not an easy job. So we took care of it. And then Sunday, other issue, this lady keeps saying that we violate Sundays, extended hours, so forth, but we are not opening Sunday at all. It was since last year. We're not extending the hour at all. And also the leaking oil. Sounds like we are dumping the oil into the creek, but that's absolutely, that's not correct. When we change the oil, whatever, great once in a while we do lawnmower. Majority of the repair was a tiny little 2-cycle hedge trimmer and blower. In fact, all the blowers we are not setting at all. We're not everything going to be electric, going to green. So we don't do much repair. Chainsaw repair and something very, very minor stuff. So the comment of leaking the oil, dumping into the creek, that statement is just a out of portion. So my intention was not try to violate and act like I didn't know anything. That's not how it went. And offense-wise, we are buggerized so many times. And you can check the police report. We are broken in so many times. So there's no fence in the property. A lot of stuff is stolen. Number of items, pots and fountains and some valuable stuff are taken away because there's no security. So we decided at least protect ourselves. So we'll build a chain link fence. So forth. And it's not like I wanted to violate the lease issue. That's not how it came. I wanted to, I didn't want it to break any law. It's just, that's how everything went. So the big truck issue came up. I didn't know that. We didn't have any lease agreement. That was not even mentioned. So I agreed to build a road along the other side. We financed, we did ourselves. The city didn't help us at all. That was, if city is claiming city is a landlord, city should be, I assume city should be pitching in the cost for that. But I just quickly did it ourselves. We did the whole road. And I wanted to, help out the city as much as they can because, I don't want to create any enemies. I want to make a peace. I wanted to, be loved. So the whole thing was just new city manager trying to help us out. And I did miss one meeting because I was kind of, because of coronavirus deal, meeting was canceled and they were, postponed and they was missed. But it's not like we ignored. My store manager was there with them to go over. And before that, I did talk to the city manager regarding a lot of issues and he explained to me. So I think he has done a great job. And obviously, certainly it's not the nightmare. There's a few issues. I wanted to resolve it. And I wanted to go with the city, requirement, whatever it is. I like to go over and if I need to do something, one other issue is this boundary. We are not, based on the map, we are not using front area, we're not using at all. Based on the lease agreement map, the entry area was supposed to be from the shed, water company or something, somebody using the metal shed from there to the our storefront. That's all based on lease agreement. That's our lease ground, all the way up to the tennis court, but we're not using at all. So I really like to have city consider that. We're not using quite a large area, and we encroaching, yeah, it's not that big of area. I did have submitted the, I did go over with the city manager, Mr. Dino before too. So you should know how much we are not using and how little we are encroaching. I'd really like to have you guys take a look at it. And, you know, certainly I don't want to be an enemy to the city. And I really like to have city consider no issues. I guess that you guys have any questions?
Okay, so is that all you have, Mr. Corey?
Yeah, I think I covered a lot of questions and so forth.
Okay. So what we'll do is we will go to the council for meeting or for comments, and then we'll go to the public for comments, and then Alice will have a couple of minutes of rebuttal, and you'll also have a couple of minutes of rebuttal.
Okay.
So what I'd like to, and we still have more to do.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do is go to the council to see if you have any questions before we go out for public comment. And I'd like to start with Ms. Lintel. Hang on, Pat. There you go.
Okay. I was at the Planning Commission meeting in August, and I spoke about many of the things that Mr. Morey had done. He is not a good neighbor. Initially, he had his own lock on the gate to the pathway, and he would only allow that to be open when he was open because of theft of his product. And then he kept telling us that he was going to put up a fence so people couldn't get in to steal. And so he kept repeating this and repeating it, but he never did it for a long, long time. And then he had his product in the pathway until Dino had him move it. And he has on many occasions had his lawnmowers and all out on the city street rather than on the premises. And Mr. Morey encroached property, which was not included in the lease. He stayed open on Sundays way beyond his allotment of 12 per year, which he had agreed to. The number of bins for his product, he didn't abide by the number in the lease. He has exceeded that greatly. And that's just an idea of what Mr. Morey seems to tell you what he thinks you want to hear, and then he does exactly as he wants to. He's not been a good neighbor. And so for this reason, I think we should grant the appeal. Thank you.
Okay. John.
Yeah, I guess the initial question is, in addressing the agenda item, whether we grant or uphold the appeal. No, I guess we uphold or deny the appeal. And we're talking about the lease boundary and the extended hours, correct? Okay. I want to have my clarifying question is does what's contained within the lease boundary purview to this discussion?
I'm going to refer that to Alex.
Yeah, I can. So in other words, more broadly, the lease and the use permit are those.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Right. So
yes.
I think those. So the use permit is for those two things. However, staff's recommendation is based on a broader scope of the recommendation for denial to include the lease and to include the conditional use permit. So I think those are within the scope of the council to discuss.
Excellent. Okay, great. I'm really glad to hear that. Okay, so my issues have been basically, this is the first time I've ever been able to speak about this publicly, but it was my planning commission. I chaired my planning commission, which I had to recuse myself, that initially approved the initial conditional use permit for this. And that was based on that mitigated negative declaration that Alice, that actually at the time, Commissioner Green totally, and both of us had read and completely understood that in order for the conditional use permit that was initially allowed or by the planning commission, strict compliance had to be based on that I guess the footprint and the site plan met with strict compliance with that mitigated negative declaration. What's currently there installed is in no way matches or mirrors the initial site plan. So in my mind, it's been since 2014 completely out of compliance. And this has been an issue that we've been raising for years, literally, with both Dan Dawson and with Dino. I mean, I had plenty, as a resident, I couldn't talk to him as a council member, but I would talk to him as a resident and say, hey, look, this is not in compliance. So that right there is basically, I mean, that's kind of the fruit from the poison tree in my mind, is that starting all the way back in 2014, we've been at this kind of this issue. So whether it's in there or out of the lease is really kind of it's only additional. But the initial big problem that I'm having here is that the footprint and what's out there and what's installed right now is not in compliance with the lease, with the original conditional use permit, with the original CUP, and certainly not in compliance with the initial mitigated negative declaration. And the mitigated declaration really was, I think, a flaw in this whole process. They should have gone with a full-blown EIR, because the mitigated, because you are so restricted with the neg deck, is that you basically have to stay totally within that. If you go, you have no flexibility outside of that, because the assumption is that if you stay within that footprint that was initially approved, then there is no significant impacts. But since we've completely breached that and blown that out of the water, and grown beyond that, then we are totally out of compliance. And who is really on the hook for that is the city, because the city is the lead agency. And the city approved the environmental document. So if somebody wanted to come after that conditional use permit, that's our exposure, is that. And we've not been enforcing basically strict compliance to that negative declaration. And first and foremost is the traffic. We never did a traffic study because we felt that we were going to have the same amount of traffic. And as the driving range was going to incur, and that has absolutely, I mean, because we were asking for extended hours, because we had to build a road, because we've got large bins, all of these things were just like, it was a layering on of, well, it's a slippery slope. Since we're already out of compliance, or since we already were given kind of accommodation, let's go ahead and build on more of that. That's been a problem with this lease and this commercial endeavor that the city initially sanctioned since its inception. So with all of that, I absolutely will be upholding the appeal. And in terms of remedies, I mean, we absolutely need to be exploring that lease, and I know them intimately. And we've not been actually utilizing, well, we've been using the easier remedies, which are, we'll fix the problem, but the problem is not fixed because we haven't even gone back to the original. What we're doing is we're putting Band-Aids on Band-Aids. And so really, in my mind, if we're going to remedy this lease, we have to go all the way back to the initial site plan that Topes was granted approval of, not Delray Gardens. Delray Gardens took that over, and I know, and look, and I understand, and it's unfortunate that Mr. Morey's initial agreements were with Dan Dawson, because, you know, he set him up for a fall. But part of me is like, hey, look, it's all black letter. It's all been, I mean, the lease basically states you must follow the conditional use permit, and you must use this site, and there's a site plan attached to that conditional use permit, and then there's a mitigated negative declaration with 3 or 4 pages of mitigation measures. I mean, that, you know, I don't have a lot of empathy for that, because it's all black letter, and it's up to the tenant to basically meet those conditions. So again, I will be supporting this. I guess we're still kind of in clarifying questions. I don't know if we're in comments, but I'll just tell you right now that I'm going to be supporting it, upholding overturning the planning commission's thing and supporting the appeal.
All right. Councilwoman Shirley.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I want to comment, Alice Green, you did a great job. I know you've worked really hard on this appeal, and I appreciate how thorough you've been. And I know that Mr. McKenzie and Mr. Rutherford has helped you with that as well. So you've brought a lot of greater understanding to those of us who didn't know the issue, and so I want to thank you for that. And Mr. Mori, I'm deeply sorry that, again, just as Councilman Gagliotti said, that you were having to deal with City Manager Dawson to begin with, and that we weren't able to handle these issues sooner. So I will also be supporting the appeal as well. Thanks.
All right. What I'd like to do is go out to the public for any public comments. Please use the raise hand on the chat function, please.
Can't find it. Where is it? I don't see it.
Yours doesn't have it.
Okay, so Mr. Berger, would you like to go first? You're muted.
Coming up. Hold on.
Okay, and you have 3 minutes. There we go.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have a raised hand. Who owns the lawnmower repair shop? This is a loaded question.
So I just want to remind everyone that what we're talking about today and right now is the lease boundary areas and the expanded hours of operation.
Okay, well, the question that came up on this was the polluting the creek. And if the lawnmower repair shop has anything to do with the Delray Gardens, and by the way, I am a customer of Delray Gardens, that shop, and I'm a automotive repair shop owner, so it's a prudent question. That shop is run poorly just on the basis of how they worked outside of the boundaries of the building. So you're going to have waste, you're going to have toxics going into the ground. It's not a concrete area, it's not an area that's clean, it's dirt. So how is that going to be managed and kept from going into the creek even subterraneanly? Those are things to be considered. Next is a lease is a lease. What does the lease say? What's the definition of the lease? The definition of the lease is going to tell you what the boundaries are. And if it doesn't, then that lease was poorly written. I don't think that's the case here. So what is the lease? If the lease defines the boundaries and he's encroached on that, then there's a valid point here.
He's breached.
Everything, and on top of that, and he's breached the lease, as my wife is whispering in my ear over here. Everything that he's done on what we'll quote unquote call an improvement also needs to be brought into compliance. That brings up another big issue: is the fencing that he's put up, is that in compliance? So what's happened here is a can of worms, and it's a mess. And you need to go back to the basics. You need to go back to what the lease says, and it needs to be compliant. He needs to be compliant with the lease. And if he wants to go and ask for more space, then it has to be something within what the books say should happen. I'm a business owner. I have to respect what my landlord says. Notoriously, government is really bad at being landlords, and this doesn't make any exception. And I really don't care what happened with Mr. Dawson. It takes two to tango. And so Mr. Mori is very well aware of the agreements he made with Mr. Dawson, whether they were legal or not. What is legal is what the document says, and that's what has to be abided by. And I cannot see any other way of seeing it. It's a black and white. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other public comments? Ken Rutherford.
Thank you very much, Ken Rutherford, Via Verde. I also just want to thank Alice Green for her effort, and I know how much time and energy she has put into this to help make this an issue that the city council is now considering, rather than just brushing over and passing over this. I know that many of the commissioners at the Planning Commission meeting raised some of these issues, and I was very troubled that they didn't push harder to not be swayed, that they needed, I felt they felt they needed to make the decision that they were being asked to make by the staff. And I appreciated Commissioner Krieger voting no and expressing the desire to look further into the compliance of the tenant, because after all, the city is the landlord. And it's not just a normal piece of property. This is a deeded piece of property that was dedicated as parkland. It's a special piece of property, and we shouldn't treat it just like any business. We should go above and beyond and make sure that business is the jewel of our city if we're going to allow a commercial space there. I'm glad to hear that so far, everyone is supporting granting the appeal, and I hope that you will bring Mr. Morey into compliance with the lease and take a hard look at that negative declaration and realize the impact to the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Any other public comment? If you'd like to say something, raise your hand. Dennis Allion.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, there are severe issues with the compliance. And I just hope that in dealing with Mr. Morey, we don't lose sight of the fact that the property he did take over, the driving range, was abandoned. And I think he made some sincere efforts to improve the property. It doesn't detract from what, or does not excuse those violations that have been properly pointed out by Alice Green and as discussed in this rather lengthy discussion. However, I just hope that the city will continue to work with Mr. Morey. Maybe he hasn't been the best neighbor, but I think his intent was to be a good neighbor. I personally liked shopping down at the garden center. It's convenient, and they do a very good job down there. It's also, we also need to appreciate the fact that there is a nice trail where you can safely walk to the Safeway Shopping Center. Yes, there were problems with it. Those problems were addressed. I don't like the looks of some of those containers that are sitting down there right now, and things like that need to be addressed. But I hope the city will continue to work with Mr. Morey and that he will cooperate and continue to run his business down there and clean things up. It will look much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Karen Harris.
Hi, Mayor Kerr, City Council people. I know this is a very difficult decision for you to make tonight, but I know Mr. Morey has good intentions. I feel like the city should have been a better landlord and looking over their property and making sure that there was compliance with the lease. But even before that, why was a commercial facility even put on that property in the first place? I want to know how that process happened, about the zoning overlay. I want to get to the bottom of that, about the C1, CV1. Never got to see that. I don't think any of the public got to see that. There's a lot that we don't know. I don't think a lot of the commissioners and council people have seen that either. It seems to go against the deed restriction that's on the Work Memorial Park from the Work family. I understand why we wanted to build the Hall Road, because we don't want those big trucks bringing all that material through our residential community, but why were those big trucks allowed anyway? We can't have a haul road going through a wetlands. I know this isn't exactly what we're talking about tonight with this appeal, but I hope that the council people here hear what's going on and go back to the beginning of what those decisions were made, how they were made, and bring it back to the public so that it can be transparent in all the decisions that are being made. And I commend Mr. Maury for what you've been doing for our community. I think you're a wonderful man, and I feel sorry for what you're going through. I think the city has a lot of debt to owe to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, what I'd like to do is come back and Alec or Ms. Green, if you would like for a rebuttal. I would like to keep it to 3 minutes or less.
I don't have anything to add. I think anybody who has taken a look at the packet of information, read the materials, knows what the situation is. And there's a lot of really good information in there. So anybody who hasn't had a chance to look at everything, please do. That's my comment.
Okay. And Mr. Maury,
Yes.
if you would like to rebut anything that was said, or
A few things I like to say.
okay.
Does everybody have a boundary map for the lease agreement area?
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys all know the area we're not using at all. The front area, that's fairly large area. We're not using at all. And compared to the area we're not using, and compare the encroached area, is, when you look at it, you are making a big deal out of encroached area. That's very, very small area. The area we're not using is very large area. So please consider that. I mean, also, being bad neighbor, that's completely wrong. Since day one, I moved in, worked with the police department. Those two gates right behind the Safeway and the front area there, those locks are controlled by the police department. I have nothing to do with them. Pat mentioned that I was controlling it. I was not a good neighbor. That's completely personal. Pat, you gave me this. You came to the store one time. You introduced yourself as a commissioner. You asked me, commissioner, get a discount? I refused. No, you don't get the discount because you're commissioner. And since that, you have become enemy. I mean, that's not fair. I want to be a good neighbor, and I never control the gate. Those two gates are controlled by the police department. And in fact, oftentimes I have to open myself to get in, especially the back, behind the Safeway. And being labeled as a bad neighbor, that's completely out of. That's not true. I have donated all the plants to the city parks. I have done a lot of, try to help everybody in town. And then somebody called me a bad neighbor. That's completely out of proportion. That's not true. I want to be a good neighbor. I want to make everybody happy in the town. And please look at the boundary that I'm not using, and the boundary I encroached, and all this issue. I just sorry I'm getting so upset, but this is really upsetting. People call me a bad neighbor. and making up a story. That is absolutely wrong. I want to be a good neighbor. I want to be I want to be loved. So please consider that. Compare the lease area we are not using and the area that we encroached is totally different. Only a small portion we encroached. And again, Mr. Dawson, under his, agreement, I took down all that telephone pole and all that stuff. That was not an easy job. Anyway, also Sunday issue. We haven't opened Sunday since last year. We are told it's okay to open by the city manager, but we're not opening it. So hour is not an issue. So boundary is the only issue, I think, right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mori. Pat? You're muted.
First of all, I would never have identified myself as being a commissioner because I have never served on the planning commission. And also, Mr. Mori says that the city controls the gate and the lock. That is true at this point, but it was not true initially. The only reason that he lost control of the gate was that the city manager and police chief at that time removed Mr. Mori's lock and put on the city's lock. So those are just two things that I wanted to mention to refute what
It's not true. That is completely wrong.
So, Mr. Mori, I'm sorry I allowed that comment. Let's move on to council comments and move towards a vote. So what I'd like to do, Pat, do you have any other comments?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. John, any comments? Last comments?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short, but I just wanted to address it. Part of me is agrees with Councilmember Shirley's kind of thing. Is that we may not necessarily have been the best landlord in I guess informing our tenant the strict compliance that is needed. Just in the points in the comments that basically Mr. Mori just made, in that he feels that because he's not using one part of the lease area, it's okay to use a much smaller port. But the whole concept, the reason that lease boundary is crafted the way that it is to avoid the environmental impacts that are identified in the mitigated negative declaration. And you can't have a mitigated negative declaration if you don't avoid all significant impacts. So it's all basically connected. And that I don't know, maybe it sounds as though we did not convey that. But again, I do think, as somebody who's taking on a public lease from a public entity that and has a conditional use permit associated with that, with an environmental document associated with that, it's their responsibility to be compliant. So while I'll take some blame for exposing him to my my previous city manager, was it Dawson, and I'll also even say that in some ways Dino was airdropped into this thing and came into it and didn't know all the history, and I'm sure Mr. Mori came in and said, look, I've got this road, which we're not talking about tonight, but I've got this road that needs to be improved. I'll go ahead and make the improvement. And Dino said, yeah, that sounds great if it's going to help out the city. But it goes back to the mitigated negative declaration stated specifically, and the layout and what was initially approved stated specifically not to have a road, because Topes wanted to put in a road. And so again, it's a Band-Aid on a Band-Aid on a Band-Aid. And now we are in, to me, in almost an unfixable situation unless everyone agrees to go back and reset. But I don't know how we're going to actually do that. So I'm sorry that my comments went a little bit longer than I'd promised. But again, I'm going to be supporting the amendment, or the appeal.
Appeal. All right. No worries on the time. Kim.
Yes, I think Councilman Gagliardi said it well. We really need to look back at what originally was meant for that area. And I've done all the reading in the packet. I've read the letters that have come to the council. And I do want to point out, similar to what John said, that you can't equate the boundary that's not used to the boundary that is encroached upon, because that part that's encroached upon is very different and has different environmental needs than the part you're not using. So it's not a good argument for that. And so I think we really need to go back to what the original lease was stating. We need to go back and look at that negative declaration, and that's what we need to abide by. So for me, it's a very straightforward decision to make, and that's what I'm basing my decision on. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask you one question though? One last question.
Yes, you may.
Okay. So I understand that we are encroaching the back area there. Now, can I use the leased area? In other words, right, front area with a parking area beyond that repair shop area? That area is all leased area. Can I use that area?
So, Mr. Mori, what we're talking about tonight is the appeal. And I'm fairly certain that we'll be having more conversations about next steps. And that could be part of a next step conversation.
Okay.
So right now, all we're talking about is the appeal and the current request for lease boundary and the expanded hours.
Okay. And
so we can talk about that later. I just want to say that I agree with Kim and John. I think what we need is a reset. I think there were probably promises made with a handshake that probably shouldn't have. And we need to go back to the beginning, take a look at what happened, make sure we're all clear, including Mr. Mori, and move forward from there, taking into account the fact that you do want more property, how we do that, when we do that, that's the next step. Okay. But for now, what I'd like to do is I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I move that we accept staff's recommendation to uphold the appeal.
I'll second that.
Okay, Karen, can you do a roll call, please?
Councilmember Gagliotti?
Aye.
Councilmember Shirley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lintel?
Aye.
Mayor Kerr?
Aye. Okay, so it passes unanimously. Mr. Mori, we will be in touch. This is not the end of the conversation.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for coming. It was nice to see you. I want to thank Alice for all of the work that they did to pull together a complicated history of things the city did and didn't do. So thank you on that. So let's move forward. It's been a long evening and we have some more to do. So what I'd like to do is go to item number 7, staff reports. City manager report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. City staff continues to work hard during the COVID pandemic. Our police officers, who you may know were impacted by the virus, are doing better, but they still need time to mend, and your good thoughts for their recoveries would be appreciated. On January 24th, the state's shelter-in-place order was rescinded and the city reverted back to the tiered status that was in place prior to the shelter-in-place order. There are good links both on the state of California and the county website. So you can get to the county website links from the city's website, and they will explain, in case you've forgotten, what those tiered statuses are. Currently, we're in purple, which is the highest level, which means there's the most impact from the virus. But some of those restrictions have been loosened. Personal care services, some personal care services, and outdoor dining. But you can check the website for further. While those operations may have been loosened, Local officials in Monterey County are still trying to get the vaccine rolled out in an efficient manner. And there are a lot of discussions that both myself and the mayor have had with other elected and appointed officials, and hopefully we'll have some more information on that coming shortly. With that in mind, and in light of the virus making its way into our staff, City Hall will continue to be closed to visitors. Although staff will continue to work with a combination of staggered hours and working remotely as is necessary.
Hello.
As always, our police department.
Are you at the meeting?
As always, our police department will be operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, should you need our assistance. And our public works supervisor, Ron Fucci, will also be doing what he normally does and socially distancing as much as he can. From the last month, some of the highlights, of course, we've heard that City Manager Dino Pick has submitted his resignation effective February 1st. We've received on the consent agenda, we've approved the Prop 68 Parks funding grant and look for some very interesting discussions and ideas about how we can improve our parks with some grant funds from the state. We're embarking on a large-scale reorganization of our filing system. This will be a long-term project that will make us more effective and efficient, as well as allow us to collate and access the myriad of documents like the one in today's appeal in the proper place so that staff and council and public can have access to them in a more timely, efficient, and effective manner. And it's a long time coming. We continue to work on our new financial processes with regional governmental services, and we'll be working on a mid-year budget adjustment in February for council's consideration. Staff submitted a $5,000 grant for water bottle refill stations from Cal Recycle program, and looking forward to using that money to upgrade the water stations in our park. And on the city front, notably the Monterey County Superior Court recently awarded the city $72,081 in restitution from our former city manager, Dan Dawson, stemming from his recent conviction related to his tenure here at the city of Delray Oaks. Public Works, Ron has been working this week on storm prep. He has all the contractors on standby, ready to respond to the city over the next couple of days, should they be necessary, as well as himself. As was noted earlier, he did a fantastic job getting the overlay on the Rosita and Paloma walkway. And then what we're also looking at is getting estimates and coming up with a plan to fix up some of our other walkways, most specifically the Work Street and Portola one. Police department, we've started getting our vaccines. Training continues on the new records management system. The police department is conducting a background investigation on a new reserve officer. She's a candidate with previous police experience in the LA area. And then police department volunteer Ozell Murray is going to be starting the transition to become a reserve police officer with our city. He has previous police experience and has been volunteering and helping out the city with lots of public relations efforts and administrative efforts. And then the police department is doing a lot of training, even though COVID restrictions are in place. CPR, AED, pursuit training. The Monterey Bay Area Self-Insurance Association will be hosting 2 use of force trainings. These will be done by Zoom, but it's very important training that our police department is not necessarily required to do, but we go above and beyond. And then we'll also be doing in March, officers will start to attend a principled policing, bias-based policing training that all gets post-credit hours. Other than that, we are just trying to get through this pandemic and do as much as we can to keep the city moving forward with all the transition. Mayor?
Thank you. I just want to check in. It's 9 o'clock. We have some more to do. We can either take, a 5-minute break now or right before the closed session. If any of the council members need to take a break, please do so. But any thoughts? Can we wait until right before the closed session?
I could push through.
Okay.
I mean, it's just the only thing. Yeah.
I'm sorry. John?
Well, the only thing that's left is just our staff reports, correct?
Well, our staff reports, but then we have a closed session that will take a while.
No, I mean, but until close, all that's left, yeah.
Yeah. Pat, are you okay to wait?
I'm okay to wait. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. So let's go to Kim Shirley. Would you like to do your council report, please?
Sure, I'll make this fast. All right, so January 9th was my first meeting with the Monterey Peninsula Housing Coalition. And so that's a group of electeds and some MBEP people who are great. And so it's really fun to get together with people to talk about pushing forward affordable housing. On January 11th and 25th, they're Mondays at 3. I also attended the COVID briefings that the county is doing. So it's good to get that information. Tuesday, January 12th, I had my first, I did an orientation with the AMBAG executive director. And then on Wednesday, January 13th, I actually had the AMBAG meeting. And then on Tuesday, January 19th, I did an orientation for M1 Water as the alternate. And then on January 21st, I did the League of California Cities conference. And then I also, I missed the one on Friday, but I reviewed that over the weekend because on Friday, I also did the Monterey Regional Waste Management District. So I'll have all these typed reports for Karen, and you can see them later. If you have any questions, please ask. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. Donaldson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have been attending the new council members academy, did that last Thursday and Friday, and will continue that this week. Also had the orientation with the Monterey One Water, which is usually done on site, but it was done via Zoom. And as council member Shirley mentioned, she was also with me for that orientation. They gave an overview of budget, projects, the water treatment process, which they are treating up to 17 million gallons on a daily basis. And they also talked about the Pure Water Monterey plant. And one of the interesting things there is that it will be almost entirely powered by landfill gas by next year. And that's through the use of organics, which is great news. I also attended the Monterey One Water Board meeting yesterday. One of the things they talked about was grant money, and you've probably seen it in the paper or on the news, the amount of money that they've received. They've been very persistent, and they're going to continue to ask for more. The one that you probably heard about was the $19 million that they received, but total, they have received nearly $40 million in grant money, which is about 40% of the total cost of that whole project. One of the other updates is that the second deep injection well was completed on New Year's Eve. Now we have a total of 4 that are in service. That's 2 deep wells and 2 shallow wells. And they add 10 acre feet per day into the basin. That'll put them just still short, a little bit shy of the 3,500 acre feet that's required. There are 2 additional deep wells that are coming. One is going to be funded by Monterey One and the other by the Water Management District. And they should be in place by November of this year and February of next year. And that should produce about 3,700 acre feet per year. One of the things they also mentioned is periodically they take the wells offline and flush them. And that's a 14-day period, and it's to remove sand and silt. And then they put them back into operation, and it maximizes efficiency. Some of the other things they talked about, the COVID impacts, is the price that they're paying for chemicals and materials. And one of the things they talked about specifically was the fact that liquid oxygen has tripled in price, which is having an impact for them. And then lastly, they're starting an initial financial analysis to consider a potential rate increase down the road, which that hasn't been done for many, many years. And that's my report.
Thank you. Mr. Gagliotti.
So I only had one meeting. It was an orientation for MST. I was unable to make the initial meeting, and Pat went in my absence, so she'll be and it was actually the strategic session. So, and then I think they combined it. So the MST report will come from Pat, and then next week it will be our first water master meeting, which should be interesting because we're formalizing basically. There was a letter that went out, and we're formalizing basically the concern that we are seeing saltwater intrusion in the basin, and what our next steps are going to be from there.
Thank you. Ms. Lintel.
Yes, to start with, I would like to mention that Alex Lorca, our city attorney, has recently been promoted to shareholder and director of Fenton and Keller. Congratulations, Alex.
Very good.
Congratulations.
Woohoo!
And MST, due to not being informed that he was primary on MST until the last minute, John had already set up meetings for his employment. So that's why I attended. David Burnett was sworn in as the MST rep for the city of Marina. And the action for this meeting was actually, as John mentioned, a strategic planning workshop. It was most interesting and successful, even though it was done on Zoom. Everybody participated in the general meeting, and then there were breakout of smaller groups to discuss and report back. And the facilitator was good, kept things moving, and the scribe for my group was outstanding, very knowledgeable and helpful. Seaside Sanitation, I attended the meeting where we approved a memorandum of understanding with Monterey One Water for cost share participation in the amount of $1,975 for fats, oils, and grease public education programs for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. Received an update on the projects under construction. Del Monte is near completion. Rosita is well underway and should be completed in the next couple of weeks. And the Fremont Ortiz Broadway is going out for bid. Community Human Services December meeting was canceled, so I attended a personnel committee meeting where we discussed our review of the personnel policies and our recommendations with Robin McCray, who is the CEO of Community Human Services. I attended the board meeting. There was an excellent presentation on Casa de Noche Buena. It is up and running, and they admitted 12 clients, and it's fully staffed. The Personnel Committee was directed to develop a policy regarding mandatory COVID-19 vaccination of staff, as well as several other items submitted by board members. The Personnel Committee was also directed to review and address a couple of other items on the policies. And miscellaneous, I watched the inauguration on TV, and during the invocation, I was reminded that prior to the city council meeting going virtual, we had the salute to the flag and an invocation. The salute to the flag has been returned, but not the invocation. If the US can have an invocation, why can't we? I would like to see it returned to our city council meetings. Mayor Kerr, would you please tell us why the invocation has not been returned? And that's the end of my report.
Okay, thank you. So for my report, it's been a while since our last regular meeting, and it was nice to have some downtime around the holidays. As Acting Chief Manager Hoyne mentioned, we have had some scares with 2 of our police officers coming down with COVID, and I am so glad to report that they are both recovering, and I hope to see them back as quickly as possible. As I've indicated previously, I regularly attend the Monday countywide meetings with supervisor, mayors, and other executive leaders. With our new Board of Supervisors chair, she opened the meeting to council members and city managers, including Acting City Manager Hoyne, who talked a little bit about the information that was disseminated, and I know Councilwoman Shirley has also been attending. The topic is usually always around COVID and its impact on our region. In addition to public confusion and frustration, there's also confusion and frustration about vaccine availability and distribution by attendees of the meeting. The county currently receives just 2,000 vaccines a week. And it appears that healthcare workers and those most vulnerable, like those in assisted living, are still being vaccinated. And the method to dispense other groups or dispense vaccines for other groups is still not clearly identified yet. Thursday, January 7th, I attended the special city council meeting to determine board appointments. Friday, January 8th, the regular Mayor's Association meeting where we also appointed new officers and placed appointments to the regional boards. I am now the vice chair for the City Select and the Mayor's Association. Looking forward to that. Saturday, January 9th, similar to Councilwoman Shirley, we met with the Monterey Peninsula Housing Coalition where a few new electeds were joining us. We discussed having a visioning meeting for next steps for this coalition, and so I look forward to that. Held a What's on Your Mind for any interested residents. The discussion revolved around our parks and recreational things that folks might be interested in. Attended Sustainable Delray Oaks on the 14th. There's some shifting of positions on the steering committee, and they are looking for a few new faces if you're interested in getting involved locally. Friends of Arroyo Del Rey discussed water monitoring results that were very interesting and potential watershed study of our wetlands. They are also hoping to work with Ron to clear some of the ivy on the trees in the park. Just a moment. I also held a meeting, a blended meeting with Sustainable Delray Oaks, the MAC for Parks and the MAC for Arts on overlapping interests. One idea that came out is the potential of an interactive educational activity that highlights features in our city, which might include activities focused on the history of Delray Oaks, the different environments within Delray Oaks, and hopefully some art. And this would be tied along the Ford Tag Trail. So there will be more coming out about that. The Mayor's Advisory Committee for Parks Chair Terry Laxier set a meeting with Acting City Manager Hoyne, Ron Fucci, and a gentleman from Monterey Peninsula Engineering to discuss a possible space where exercise equipment designed for those of us with older joints could enjoy. More information will also be forthcoming in the next couple of months. January 15th, I attended my first meeting of the California League of Cities Community Services Policy Committee. I, along with 9 other new members, joined 46 other electeds from across the state. The League of Cities takes positions on state legislation, and this committee decided to focus our work for the next year on 1, COVID impacts, 2, parks, open space, and recreation, 3, community resilience, disaster emergency preparedness, and 4, senior aging issues. We will be busy. A couple of important takeaways. They were discussing the state budget, and the current state budget includes a windfall, yet the next 2 years are projected some pretty deep deficits. So it's something we may want to take a look at as we go into our Finance Committee meetings and taking a look at the budget for the next 2 years. On the same day as the attack on our nation's capital, a master plan for aging in California was introduced that no one probably heard about. It's a 10-year plan for government, private sector, and philanthropy to prepare the state for the coming demographic changes. So that'll be interesting to see how that kind of lays out and may touch our city. Our next meeting isn't until April, but I will keep you apprised when that comes up. January 18th, I attended via Zoom the MLK Day celebration put on by the City of Seaside and the Pan-Hellenic Council. I missed the annual march, but it was nice to hear from speakers from across the country. It's been a rough year. I also had a conversation with the manager of Safeway recently discussing COVID and the fact that their pharmacy personnel will be able to give vaccines once they become available. So we will have that in literally our backyards. Monterey Mayor Roberson and I have been discussing holding meetings with Peninsula mayors on topics that uniquely affect this side of the county. There is, in my opinion, a lot of duplicate work that is done on matters that can be achieved together, costing less and creating more uniformity for all the residents of the peninsula. One example might be, and apparently there is work on this, towards a regional climate plan. The peninsula mayors met for the first time this Monday morning. They also invited city managers, and that meeting resulted in a letter asking the Board of Supervisors to encourage the county health officer to ensure adequate testing is done for the seasonal workers as they begin to come back into Salinas. Excuse me. Yesterday, I had an annual board member check-in with TAMC, with the executive director, to review two items. One, the public input on design for FORTAG. Apparently, there's been a 2-month delay due to a Caltrans issue. And once it's resolved, we will begin scheduling public meetings on how we want the path to go through our city. And then the other topic was the 68-218 roundabout, which probably won't be breaking ground until 2025 or 2026. So there's a lot of work that goes into transportation projects. A couple of things coming up. I want to mention that there's a free rainwater harvesting class this Saturday at 11. Reach out to Councilperson Shirley for information. Next Tuesday, we will be having strategic planning that will begin at 8:30. And next Wednesday, we have the Finance Committee beginning at, I believe it's 11 o'clock. And all of those will be announced, and everyone is welcome to any and all. And that's it for me. And now, I just want to make note of the correspondence in the binder or in the agenda packet, letter of recognition for, I believe it's Officer Baza for finding a computer. Is that right, Karen? The letter? Yeah. His diligent work to get that. The MST highlights and the Mosquito Abatement District agenda and highlights, as well as the December TMC had highlights, pardon me. There was no meeting in late December, and the January meeting is tomorrow. So on that, what I'd like to do is take a 5-minute break and then come back and we go into closed session. Pat, just a moment. And so what I'd like to do is go over the closed session items, see if there's any public comment before we go. That way, if you don't want to stay and wait for us, you can leave for the evening. So so we will be discussing 3 items: conference with legal counsel on existing litigation, California Native Plant Society versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority. Number 2 is Michelle Ball versus the City of Delray Oaks, and initiation of litigation, 2 potential cases. So any public comment on those before we go? Alice.
Hello, this is actually Douglas McKenzie at 16 South Cedo. And sure appears to me that pursuing litigation is the only way that residents' voices can be heard. Thank you.
Thanks, Douglas. Anybody else for public comment before we head in? Okay. Pat, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. I had requested that you would tell us why we don't have the invocation returning as well as the salute to the flag. I don't understand why we don't have that. Can you explain why?
Well, we do have a salute to the flag, and I will work with Acting City Manager Hoyne on the invocation. Are you requesting that it comes back?
Absolutely so.
Okay, so
we don't know why it hasn't come back then.
well, because we were on Zoom and things didn't happen the same way, and perhaps it's time to revisit that.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we're going to take 5 minutes. We'll be back at 9:30 on the nose, and we'll be in closed session. So thanks, everybody. We'll be right back. Mr. Loka.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With respect to all matters on the closed session agenda, an update was provided to council. Council provided direction, but no reportable action was taken.
Thank you, sir. All right, our next meeting date is Tuesday, February 23, 2021 at 6 o'clock. On that, we're adjourned. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night,
Good
all.
night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.